All right. Kumkum, over to you.
Okay, it's great to get started here. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kumkum Dilwali, and welcome to Health in Buildings Roundtable 2022. I'm with Integrative Sciences, and I don't come here alone today. We do want to start with a shout out to the team that is just helping on the technology end of the house here on the coordination part. So my first shout out goes to Christopher Pearson, Lan Vandehei, and Meenakshi Mittal, who are here to support and have been in terms of helping us get to this place today. I do have the distinct privilege of welcoming everybody and being a host for this important event. I did think long and hard, and I said, where do we start? And I said, we've got to start from a place of gratitude. And that reason is pretty simple, because what we have here is an extraordinary gift. It's this gift called Health in Buildings Roundtable. We've received this floating think tank, thanks to NIH. It's where scientists, engineers, architects, physicians, scholars, and professionals across so many disciplines have convened to advance ideas on how the built environment can improve human health. So I must start this morning by acknowledging those who reminded me in recent months of the impact that HiBR has had in the past and what it can have for decades to come. So one of the first persons I do like to acknowledge is Michelle Coley of National Institutes of Health. I thank you for your confidence in our abilities at this time of transition. Michelle is the one who was heading up the coordination of all activities HiBR for years. And she is the one who has helped and facilitated the handoff here to Integrative Sciences. And for that, we thank you. If you can just raise your hand so everybody knows who you are. There you go. Susan Permit of National Institutes of Health. We appreciate that you speak up and that you always keep the mission of HiBR at the fore. You have called at all times of the day and night. You've kept me on track. You've kept me honest. And for that, I thank you. So Susan, I know that you're here. And if everybody can see and possibly hear you, shout out to you. Linda Sorrento, there you are. Well, Susan is there. Susan, there's Susan. Thank you, Susan, from the bottom of my heart. Linda Sorrento, you did the heavy lifting. You pulled together the scholars program. You pulled together the agenda with other core people all together. And what everybody will be enjoying in these next 2 days. For that, we thank you. The leadership that you have brought before I got into the picture back over here. Thank you, Linda, for everything that you're doing. We have Judy Herwagen, GSA. Judy, where are you? There you are. I know you're on the West Coast and you've gotten up at an ungodly hour to be able to participate and do things. You bring wisdom to this conversation about how to stay on course. And you've helped me in these last few months in whatever conversations we've had. So for that, Judy, I thank you for being here and bringing your leadership. And finally, I've got Barbara Hewlett. Barbara, I don't know if she is here yet, but she's maintained the momentum. Her renowned work has stood the test of time. I don't know her as well. Oh, there she is. But my hope is that in the coming weeks, months, years, I'll get to know you better. But I know that you've been a force for HiBR. So thank you for that. Now, and there are many others. There are many of you who have held strong and held a faith that HiBR will continue. And our theme today is continuity. And you will hear that because whether we're talking about sustainability, resilience, at the end of the day, it's about continuity. So for those of you who are new to HiBR, I'd like to just take a moment here and say that, we have been around since 1994. The work started at NIH thanks to the vision of Charles Bloomberg. And over the years, he and many others in his core group engaged thought leaders from several federal agencies, including GSA, Department of Energy, NIEHS, CDC, US EPA, NASA, and others whom I may have missed. Forgive me for those who I missed. In addition, we've had members of respectable institutions, academia, nonprofits, and consulting firms who've joined the journey and advanced the mission of HiBR. So in the summer of 2022, NIH decided to hand off the governance and the operations of this entity. So key persons contacted Integrative Sciences, that's myself, and asked to provide interim leadership. So we are public health practitioners. We've worked for decades to promote healthy indoor environments, and our core values, they center around sustainability and operational resilience. And with those, that's what we bring to the fore. So we agreed that continuity of HiBR is a necessary prerequisite at this time. So our role, people ask, what is your role? It's to shepherd HiBR in its entirety and to find a suitable landing place so that this purpose can be continued. And to that effect, we are in conversation with some key folks, and we'd like to see what may be the best place for it to be, whether it is a government agency, a quasi-government agency, a nonprofit. We're looking to try to understand what will be the best fit. And we're giving that some thought. And to that end, we will look to form something in the way of a steering committee, a small group of folks, and so that we can shepherd it in the interim and then do a graceful handoff. That is what our goal is. So HiBR will continue to look at best practices for healthy buildings, as well as create forums for collaboration through design, conferences, and educational opportunities. We will continue to invite experts in many areas to engage in conversation and collaboration and increase knowledge about healthier buildings. So that's our promise to you. And this event is expressly designed to reestablish that starting place, to hit a reset, and to begin to redefine what HiBR can become in the future. So this forum is entitled Making Connections, Research to Practice. We've got day one, it's called Mind the Gaps, and we have day two entitled Fixing the Gaps. We have 3 tracks each day with our moderators, our scholars, and our invited speakers as panelists. We have such an esteemed group here. I'm humbled at seeing the amount of participation that people are taking out of their day jobs to be able to participate. So we recognize the efforts of all our presenters. We thank you in advance. And I know Chris is the one who's keeping me on time and keeping me honest here. So I know I need to take care of some housekeeping issues, but I have to cite an age-old proverb, which is, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And it's with that thought that I'd like to launch this event, this forum. Again, thank everybody for being here. It's going to be a great time. It's going to be exciting. I'm looking forward. Let's continue this HiBR 22 journey together. And now I need to take care of some housekeeping matters. So thank you, everybody, for joining us on this glorious September morning. The housekeeping parts basically are that today's session, it ends at 3 p.m. It will begin tomorrow again at 11 a.m. Please a reminder is to everybody to please keep yourself muted. This meeting is being recorded, and we do have a chat box. So that's available for anybody who may be experiencing a technical issue. If you have any audio or video, non-audio or video issue, and our team will do its best to facilitate support based on the comments that we receive. The chat box is also the main tool for participants to insert questions for moderators and panelists during each track. So please try to keep your questions brief and focused so that our team can properly document each for discussion. For anyone asking a question in the Q&A chat box, please be sure to include your name, organization, who the question is for, and the question itself, so that the moderators can easily identify and present it to the panelists. That'll help us save time and be efficient. Chris, did I miss anything?
Nothing on my end. Thank you, Kumkum.
Well, so on that note, I'm 2 minutes past the 11:10 part here. So we would like to begin track 1. It's called Breaking the Silos. Oh, you know what I should do is I would like to go ahead and read the little blurb here that we have in the script about the conference, about the forum. That this Health and Buildings Roundtable Forum brings together the interdisciplinary health and sustainable buildings communities to discuss how big data, AI, metrics, resources, and emerging technologies for the built environment impact health and well-being. How sustainable building design operation and technologies can improve health outcomes and identify outstanding research issues, including climate change and diversity, equity, and inclusion that remain unanswered. So we are going to see parts of that and hear about parts of that during the next couple of days. So without further ado, let's move to Dr. Stephanie Taylor, a physician who is also an architect, and she will speak about herself. And so with that, I hand it over to you, Stephanie. It's your panel. She's our first moderator for the day. Welcome.
Thank you, Kumkum. I'm absolutely honored to be a moderator for this initial track. I have to say, I first attended HiBR in 2018 when after doing some work with the GSA. And as a physician, I had become concerned about the role of the hospital in patient outcomes. I quickly realized that the health of all of us who use buildings is related to the indoor environment. However, this is back in 2014, I was having trouble finding like-minded folks who really wanted to integrate these areas. In 2018, I went to the HiBR conference, and as I've told Michelle and some other folks, I felt like I had died and gone to heaven because I was finally in a room full of people who really understood the importance of this connection. And so I'm absolutely thrilled that here we are again. I wish we were on site, but at least we're here together. So I'm going to quickly give you a little more background on what I've been doing and then introduce my fantastic panel. So here you are. Hopefully this is where you want to be in the HiBR virtual forum. So again, I do many things in my life. I am a physician primarily, or at least for a very long time. I still work at Harvard Med School and Mass General Hospital. I've become very involved with ASHRAE, setting best practices and working around how to manage the indoor environment for human health. And then finally, I'm the CEO of Building for Health. Anything I say in the next few minutes is, again, doesn't reflect HiBR. And I also am the CEO of Building for Health. So that's my financial disclosure. So the track one for the next 70 minutes or so is breaking the silos with a transdisciplinary approach. These are the fantastic panelists we have coming up, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves because I cannot do their spectacular professional tracks justice, so I'm going to let them do that. But before we jump into that, I want to give everybody sort of what may be a visceral experience about what the indoor environment is like at a scale that we can't see. So it's not only us humans that are indoors, but we live with a microbial population. So as I'm talking with you all, and you're all in your, wherever you are breathing, we exhaled little droplets. They carry the bacteria and the viruses and the particles that are normal. Doesn't mean we're sick. We all live with bacteria and viruses and fungal organisms. And you can see from this animation that this engineer or architect is shedding her skin particles into the air, onto the paper. Those are particles coming out of her nose. That's normal. She's not dripping on her paper. You can see her GI tract is illuminated. We have lots of organisms and particles in our digestive system. So you can see there's a very active exchange between human beings and the indoor environment. You also can tell that depending on how the air is managed, there is more or less communication between surfaces and air. And depending on how tightly sealed your buildings are, there will be more or less communication between outdoor particles and organisms and the indoor environment. So I show you that just to help you realize that we're living in a very active environment. And yet, the professional silos of building management, design and management, and medical care has really been quite separated. We have different goals, different language, different education, different metrics. You know, people in building management were on reducing energy use, reducing our carbon footprint, avoiding disasters from floods and earthquakes, following best practices. And in medicine, we're over in another silo. You know, we want our patients to heal. We want to follow the right protocols. We don't want to get sued. But these are very different fields. So today is really about bringing these areas together, in my opinion, to support our most valuable asset, which is occupant health. And given that all of us use buildings and we're indoors more than we're outdoors, this is an incredibly important approach. So what I have been doing that has underscored my knowledge about how important the indoor environment is for our health kind of is depicted on this slide. So my work involves monitoring indoors the metrics you see on the left, understanding their impact and the interrelationships at the secondary compounds that are formed on human health, your immunity, tissue penetration, genetic disruption, infectivity of microbes, and actually giving you a score so that you can have that visibility. So you can see how the indoor environment is impacting your health and then remediate if necessary. And in my work, it's just been absolutely stunning to me as a physician, the opportunities that are in front of us for managing the indoor environment for human health. And what we're finding, and not just me alone, but there's a vast research foundation that shows that managing the indoor environment properly reduces infections, reduces allergies, autoimmune disorders, even illnesses that you would never think are related to the indoor environment, perhaps, and to pollutants, so to speak, such as particles, heart attacks, strokes, GI problems. Even type 2 diabetes is related to some extent to inflammation, which is triggered by the indoor environment if it's improperly managed. Newborn birth weights, the length of pregnancy, productivity, absenteeism, academic performance, supporting the human microbiome, so all the microbes that live in us and on us that help us stay healthy. And perhaps, at least very surprising to me, we now know that the spread of antibiotic resistance can be controlled to some extent by how we manage the indoor environment. Separate from prescribing practices and from antibiotic usage, the environmental reservoir for antibiotic-resistant genes resides in the air and in environmental reservoirs. So we have the opportunity to improve all of these things, which is really, I think, stunning and inspirational. So with that, I would like to, let's get going with this, this track. And we have the following panelists who are going to speak and present their work. So Dr. I'm so worried about mispronouncing names. I'm going to let you introduce yourselves, and I'm really excited about today. Thank you. Please put your questions in the chat box, and we will have about 20 minutes at the end to have a discussion period. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. So we should all go around, I think, for all the panelists to do a quick introduction. Okay, so I will jump in. My name is Xuemei. I'm a professor at Texas A&M University with the Department of Architecture. So my passion is in design for health in general, and especially about design for active living, promoting physical activity, also the design of healthy schools and workplaces. Yeah, thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lingyi, and I'm assistant professor in College of Architecture at Texas Tech University. I'm very happy that I could be invited to join this great event, and I really appreciate you guys organize this wonderful room. And I really want to use this opportunity to say thank you to Dr. Zhu, who actually led me to the area about design for health. I still remember, like 7 years ago when I came to the country for my PhD program, I really didn't know what I want to do. And I really believe in that environment design can help people make a better and healthy lifestyle. Then now I really believe I have seen a lot of evidence, and it is something happening. It is true. I'm happy today that we can work together with Dr. Zhu to present some, updated findings from the recent project we have completed.
I guess I'll go next. My name is, oh, sorry, go ahead, Barbara.
I wasn't sure who was up next. I'm Dr. Barbara Marini. I'm from the University of Texas in Arlington, and I'm the Director of Interior Design here. And I've been interested for a long time in interdisciplinary work and transdisciplinary work. And I think some of the instances over the last year have really brought to light the importance of interior design as a conduit to the profession. And I think that we see our role evolving, which is what I'm going to be presenting my work with Linda Sorrento, who's also here today. So thank you.
My name is Dr. Angie Scott. I am a community concept lead and health equity lead at International Well Building Institute. And I'm very happy to be here with all of these wonderful speakers today that I have followed for quite a long time. And I'm going to be really speaking about my journey, my personal journey, going through education and what brought me to the area that I'm really focused on today, and that is well-being, diversity, equity, inclusion, and the built environment, and how those all, and sustainability, and how those all are interconnected.
Excellent. So thank you to these fantastic panelists. So let's kick off our track. And again, the panelists will all do their presentations, and at the end, we will have about a 20-minute question and answer time.
Okay, thanks again, Stephanie. Can everyone see my slide okay? Okay, thanks so much. And again, welcome. And it's really a privilege to be here, being part of the HiBR group. Thanks to the organizer, and also thanks to everyone for sharing your time today. So what we will be presenting today is really a teamwork with the focus on active school for healthy children. So we will be looking into how more innovative design ideas in school building, K-12 in particular, could help promote school-based physical activity, but also the overall healthy development among our young population. So the main focus today, we will be sharing some really detailed and promising results in a way from what we've seen from the literature review, where we look at the actual physical environmental intervention that have taken place and how they've been able to promote student physical activity. We'll also expand a little bit to talk about the implication for future research and practice looking forward. So a quick background, we all are well aware nowadays, obesity epidemic is one of the leading public health problems facing the world population. If we look at the United States alone, for children and adolescents, about 25% have obesity. That's roughly 1 in 5. And that rate has more than tripled since the 1970s. If we look at the different factors contributing to this problem, physical inactivity is a big and modifiable behavioral factor. We are also aware nowadays this is one of the top risk factors for deaths in the United States. So we have seen and we have learned the consequence of childhood obesity. On the other hand, what we also have learned and important is active kids actually learn better. When they are more active, more awake, they are more ready to learn. So the physical activity guideline for children and adolescents is they should engage in about 1 hour of moderate to vigorous physical activity per day. But we know in reality, they almost don't meet this recommendation. And overall, the population level, the level of physical activity has been actually declining over the past few decades. So with all these problems being present, there has been increasing emphasis on the role of K-12 public school, because they are where children spend a lot of time in and potentially could be a really promising scenario, location or setting for related intervention. And we have seen the development of active living research, especially in the past 2 decades or so, with the idea of really promoting a way of life that integrates physical activity into daily routine. We have also seen different professions from both the design side, design and planning, as well as public health side, with the recognition that we need our environment, whether it's building, community, and the city, to be supportive to make active living easy choice, because we are actually facing more barrier than facilitators for the environment. So this field has been heavily driven by social ecological model. The key idea behind it is human behavior in general is influenced by multi-level of factors that also interact with each other. When we look a bit closer to the possible domains of active living activity, it could be done for recreation, for household activity, occupational, and transport. For our young population, school environment is one of the most influential settings that would affect their daily activity. So actually CDC proposed this whole school, whole community, and whole child model. The key idea behind it is school should be the central place where our communities really work together to promote children's health. The 10 components in this model, 2 of them are directly relevant to what we are talking about today, is physical education and physical activity, as well as the physical environment. And they have also identified these 5 different components for the comprehensive school physical activity program, what we can do knowing children are not active enough. So that involves physical education, physical activity during, before, or after school, which also requires staff, family, and community involvement to make it more effective. On the right side, the chart is showing the potential we could really aim for if we use more supportive environment, more friendly policy to facilitate activity. These are the potential minutes of physical activity we can gain just by school-related activity, whether it's about getting to school, the time they spend in recess, in classroom, in the playground, etc., and they all add up to help our young population to reach that physical activity level or recommendation. So our literature review effort is focusing on those actual intervention studies where schools actually made changes to their environment with the hope to promote physical activity. We followed PRISMA guideline and searched multiple databases. The diagram showcases the overall process of the review. And we were able to find 44 articles, most of them using quasi-experimental design, and they came from all over the places. United States was the country with the most studies with 14, followed by UK, Australia, and other countries. And the line chart here is showing how the number of relevant intervention studies are actually increasing over time. We can see that increasing level of interest and investment in this area as well. So there are a lot of detail we won't be able to cover today, but this slide is probably the kind of highlights showing the key information that we are seeing from this body of literature. So one aspect we are seeing is we see intervention being done at a different scale of environment. So that range from the smallest scale of study station, like for example, use of sit-stand desk, to the arrangement of the whole classroom, then the whole building layout, outdoor spaces, as well as the whole campus as a whole. We also see intervention that adjust multiple environmental scale, as well as what we call multi-level intervention, which combine physical environmental changes with training and educational program. So the key finding for study station is it seems to be rather effective in reducing sitting and improving stepping, which itself is very important. But it's not as effective in promoting light, moderate, or vigorous activity because of the limited level of activity. A few studies have looked at the classroom and building scale. They seem to be promising, but we really need more and more coordinated study and systematic measurements to be able to synthesize the results better. And outdoor spaces is where most studies have been done. They range in scale in terms of the investment and elements being changed in the environment. Overall, it's quite promising, but we also realize it's constrained by the fact of how much time children could actually spend in outdoor spaces during school time. And then moving into multi-scale and multi-level studies, they seem to be in general more promising when multiple approaches were applied at the same time. So we will only be able to highlight a few studies for each level. So for study desk, this is the way, and also a sample of how we are extracting the information in terms of changes in outcome, what intervention has been used. Again, the key message on the study desk level is the use of sit-stand desk has been more popular, overall effective in reducing sitting and improving standing, but not as much for more intensive level of physical activity. And these are some visual diagrams, like the type of desks that have been used in different countries, one from Belgium, one in the United States, and they are relatively lower cost because it's a smaller element and also easier to implement in school. So that's one aspect. And classroom-wise, we have only seen 2 studies. One is more moderate motivation of introducing different activity elements versus the second one, as you can see, is really the kind of new prototype, envisioning how learning and teaching can be done differently, where learning and activity are taking place at the same time. So overall, we do see changes, improvement in physical activity, but what we saw from the first one is the change, and the positive change is short-lived in a way. It's effective for a few weeks, but it didn't last over that time frame. And then the outdoor spaces is the most studied element. We have a lot of studies. We're not able to all list them here, but these 5 kind of showcases the type of intervention taking place in outdoor spaces. It ranges from smaller element of like adding marking on a playground to introducing new equipment or combination of those two to larger scale renovation about whether it's greening the whole playground to encourage children to play, or the complete reconstruction that involved multiple elements like marking, equipment, etc. So overall, quite promising, and Lingyi will be sharing more details about specific studies and moving to the next phase of discussion. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Drew. So from here, we are going to show you some samples of outdoor space interventions. So as you can see, there are 6 images on this slide, and they're all from one single study that we reviewed. And this study was conducted in Denmark and involved 6 different schools, and they developed environment design to the outdoor spaces just in terms of the unique features of each of the school, because they want to really deliver the tailored interventions in terms of the unique context background of each school. For this study, they did not look at the whole group of children, because those researchers, they suspected if the innovative design of outdoor space could just bring, more opportunities for children who are already physically active to play more or explore more. So in this study, they only look at children who are actually least active, and the results actually turned out to be very positive. So in general, averagely, among all the 6 schools, especially least active children, they have more time spent in the schoolyard, averagely 12 more minutes per day. And they also spend more time, especially for physical activity in the schoolyard during recess. Next slide, please. So very briefly, I just want to show you 2 examples of the participating study and how they applied the intervention to their outdoor spaces. So one of the participant school, it actually didn't have many facility on the site to support children's physical activity. But during the intervention, they added 5 movement areas. As you can see, they have one area, one healing area, and another area can allow children to play with music and dancing. And they also added area for children to have outdoor learning environment, and also environment to accommodate their cooking and eating behavior, and one more area to provide diverse healthcare physical activity related facilities. Another participant school, they took advantage of the surrounding environment and developed a loop from their existing schoolyard and merge into the woodland area nearby. And also for the loop design, it's not just a traditional loop that you can see children just walk around. They combine a lot of innovative design features like benches and also like swings, spider webs along the loop, and also they developed some locations along the loop inside the forest, such as forest cafe, forest amphitheater. So when children are walking around along the loop, they don't just walk, they can stop by, explore each of the spot and accumulate more physical activity during the walking behavior, the journey. Next slide, please. And also we identified another study which used one of the school we just look at together as one of the study settings. And in this study, they explore the spatial cluster of high physical activity sport and low physical activity sport by children's gender. And they combine the data into GIS and they develop different maps to show how those children are clustered at different locations. And we think this is very informative, especially to practitioners, to allow them understand which kind of design features is really effective or more attractive to children. So children would like to play around, gather a lot around that area to play and accumulate physical activity as well. Okay, so in addition to the interventions applied to one single level of environment, we also notified there was 3 studies they applied intervention, especially from the environment perspective, to multi-scales. So for one of the studies, they developed 3 different school environments. One of the school environment was traditional school with fixed and assigned chairs and desk. And the second school environment is still traditional school, but with standing desk. And they also developed a new school with a activity immersive in neighborhood. And they compared children's physical activity among those 3 different school environments. And the outcome turned out to be that children who attend the new school with active immersive environment, they have more significant physical activity level compared to children who were attending the other 2 traditional schools. And we have another slide showing some environment they developed for the activity immersive neighborhood and also for the traditional school, but equipped with standing desk and also like the stabling balls. You could next slide, please. So just now we look at some interventional just from the environment design perspective. And we also notified there were like 13 studies, like around 30% of the reviewed studies. They didn't just look at individual intervention from the environmental design perspective. They also included intervention from other many levels, such as school education programs, such as social support, such as behavior interventions. And many of them also reported very positive findings from their exploration. Next, please. So this is one of the study which look at multi-level interventions. As you can see, they applied the intervention by marking the existing playground. They also provided more equipment to support children's games. They also provided education programs to both the school staff and the students. They reported positive outcomes from some of the participants, but not all of them. They also highlight that we need to pay attention to the rigorous when we are really mirroring the physical environment in reality when we apply the interventions in the future for practice. So very quickly, here are some conclusions and implications from our systematic literature review. So first, we noticed there are some limitations to our study quality because of the screening and searching process. And because many of the studies, they use different diverse ways to measure children's physical activity. Some of them allow children to wear accelerometers. Some of them allow children to put on like pedometers, so they measure steps. Some of them measure the energy they spend. There are many different ways they measure physical activity, and also they use different ways to measure the environment, from the micro level, standing desk, to classroom, to building levels. So it was very challenging for us to synthesize findings together, like putting them into one table. But still, based on the studies that we reviewed, we can see they all kind of highlight the significance of applying environment intervention to help promote children's physical activity, especially if we apply the intervention from multi-levels and use high intensity strategies. And we also noticed some implications for our future research and practice. As Dr. Zhu just mentioned, the children's physical activity actually could be affected by factors from multi-levels. So when we are considering about the environment, when we're considering about the interventions, we should always consider intervention from multi-scales. Always keep in mind, in addition to build environment, keep in mind about the contextual factors, because each school, different school, they have their unique history, context, policy, curriculum. We should always combine them together because they work together in fact children's physical activity, and strategies should always be provided from diverse scales. And we also noticed there is in kind of rising evidence showing the positive relationship between physical activity and children's academic performances. So in future research, we can further look at how the environment or multi-level interventions can affect children's physical activity, at the same time affect their academic success as well. And we also want to see more study look at the impacts from short-term, medium, and long-term perspectives. And also a more holistic approach is very needed for active school design and planning in the future. So very briefly, we list a few ongoing successful interventional programs provided by different organizations. So many of them are kind of trying to deliver, the knowledge about how we can eat healthily, and we can accumulate more physical activity through school intervention. Some of them are also mention the relationship between physical activity and children's learning outcome. And they believe that their learning outcome is more effective or efficient when children are engaged with meaningful physical activities during the learning process. One more movement we kind of mentioned a little bit here is called Active School Initiative. And this movement is, I believe, is free to for everyone to join, for school, for community, for the families. If they want to join, they can join for free. And they provided a lot of sources like framework, guideline, to kind of indicate the school how they can provide more active environment to support children's physical activity and active learning. And in the end, we worked together and proposed a comprehensive conceptual framework. So based on what we observed from literature review, we kind of want to recommend that for the future study, we need to include interventions from multi-levels, including physical environment for sure. And also we need always keep in mind about other factors such as social environment and policy. As I mentioned, children's physical activity could be affected by factors from multi-levels, and the strategies addressing or help improve the problem should always be provided from multi-levels. And for physical environment, we should not just look at single scale. We should provide more holistic strategies combining environment from micro, like standing desk, to the medium level, building level, and also the outdoor spaces as well. And for the outcome, physical activity, of course, this is very important to children's overall development. We can further look at if this outcome can be related to other areas such as their cognitive development and also their mental health. So I think that's the last slide. Yeah, that's pretty much what we want to share for today's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was fascinating. So we'll move on to our next panelist, and I just want to encourage each of the speakers to keep their eye on the clock so that we don't get behind. But thank you very much. So we will now hear Dr. Scott.
And Angie, this is Chris. Just you're still muted.
Thank you, Chris. Can you see my screen, everyone?
You sure
Yes.
can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you for inviting me to present here. Today, I'm going to take a little bit different approach. I really want to talk about breaking down the silos through transdisciplinary approach and how I came to understand that through my work and through my lived experiences as an interior designer, design researcher, excuse me, and academic, now working at IWBI as a community concept lead. And so I will talk about my journey. I will also talk about the work that I'm doing and have done, and how that intersects with the topic here, and then get into more of the specifics around diversity, equity, inclusion, and why it is important for us to think about when we are designing spaces and in the built environment. So I've always looked at the built environment or buildings as preventative care. I have always been impacted about how the buildings made me feel when I walked into a space, and really wanting to dig deeper and understand if other people felt that way as well. So as I began school and do more of our research, I really started to really dive more deeply into these different concepts. So I first want to share what the World Health Organization says about health. And they say that it is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And so what that really is saying is that we should really understand our health from a continuum, and not looking at it from a pathogentic approach, but looking at it from a salutogenic approach, and really speaking to how we can create spaces in this topic at hand. How can we create spaces that help people to live their optimal lives? I have always also been very interested in social justice issues and culture diversity. And so I want to share this definition here by Hofstede in 1980. He says that culture is a collective programming of the mind that distinguishes the members of one group or category of people from others. And so really it is really understanding that our cultures are our beliefs, our value systems, and our traditions, regardless of our backgrounds, our ages, our racial identities, our gender identities. But it's the way that we navigate through life based on these modalities that we were born with or have learned early on in our lives. And then well-being here, this is a model from the University of Minnesota Center for Spirituality and Healing by Mary Jo Kreitzer. And she really just sets forth these different factors of well-being, and really touching on physical health, our relationships, so that social connection and community, as well as safety and security, our purpose, really looking towards something higher, and the environment, which includes the natural environment and the built environment. And really that's what my trajectory has been about, those three elements. So how can the built environment reduce stress? How can it create connection to identity? And how can it realize optimal living? So again, looking at well-being, looking at how the buildings impact us psychologically and physiologically, and how can it create connection through our varied identities? So this is my process. And I'm going to get into why I'm saying that this is my process. I started out in my education, started out at Alabama A&M University my freshman year. This is a historically Black college and university that had an interior design program at the time. Going into my sophomore year, they told us, well, in the middle of my freshman year, excuse me, they told us that the interior design program was going to be dissolved. And so we would need to find somewhere else to study this profession. this major if we wanted to stay here at Alabama A&M and stay in interior design, or if we wanted to stay in interior design, excuse me. And I want to bring this up because there are very few colleges, HBCUs, that have interior design as a major. There are only 2 that are CETA certified in the United States, and there are a couple of others that are not accredited, excuse me. And so I came back home to the University of Minnesota, which is where I'm from, and finished my bachelor's degree in interior design there. After I finished my bachelor's degree, I went on to work. I'll show you couple of areas where those were, but then I also came back and I finished with my master's and Ph.D. degree here at the University of Minnesota. And if you all are very aware, Minnesota is not very diverse when it comes to people of color, specifically Black people. And so my time at the University of Minnesota felt oftentimes, especially in my undergrad years, felt oftentimes very isolative. I always was aware that I was the only person of color in my program, but really wanted to continue to pursue this degree and also make a difference thinking about these issues. I went on to get a minor in African American Studies from the University of Minnesota and continue to really think about how we could design space that impacted people psychologically, as well as that can make people feel a sense of belonging in their spaces. So many of my projects as an undergrad student really spoke to those elements. So after I graduated from the University of Minnesota with my bachelor's degree, I went on to practice at Walsh Bishop and Associates, where I did Indian gaming casinos, as well as commercial design, working on banks and other corporate spaces. After that, I went on to Target Corporation, and there I was really involved in a project that really helped me to understand again why I was doing the thing that I wanted to do, why I wanted to get interior design, and that was to make a difference. And so at Target Corporation, I was asked if I wanted to be on a special project. I was working in the design department there, where we were doing all of the prototypes for the Target stores. And I was asked if I wanted to be on a special project to work on the Martin Luther King Center gift shops here in Atlanta, Georgia. And that is something that really, through that process, made me realize again why I really wanted to get into this field, to make a difference and to be able to speak to identity. And this project helps me to do both, actively practice this as well as understand where I wanted to go. So after I was at Target Corporation, I decided in that experience there, I decided that I wanted to really look at marketing and communications and public relations. I really felt like I was not making a difference in the field of interior design, and I wanted to make a difference. So I said I was going to set out to work in nonprofit organizations and make a difference that way. And so I went on to create a position for myself at the Gibbons Foundation for African American Literature, where we had many discussions and events and hosted authors who have focused on African American literature and brought them to Minneapolis to speak to different events there. After that, I went on to work at Midtown Global Market, and this is a market, the reason why I'm talking about this is because it is a market that really celebrated culture and it really celebrated diversity. And I was a marketing coordinator there. And so we were really tasked to help the different vendors who were entrepreneurs really create marketing for their different businesses to help them to be successful in their endeavors there. After I worked at the Midtown Global Market, I really started to miss interior design and I wanted to go back to school. I had children at that time, and I really started to think about sustainability when I had my own kids. And I started to think about sustainability specifically focused on the residential environment. How can we create spaces that impact people and create well-being in the home? How, if things are, if products are supposed to be helpful and supportive for babies, why weren't they supportive for everyone, especially when we're talking about the home environment? So that's what I set out to study as I went back to the University of Minnesota. And after I graduated from there, went on to teach at Georgia Southern University in academia. While I was in grad school, I was a research assistant where I worked on sustainable buildings through the state of Minnesota. And so we created post-occupancy evaluations. There, I also did research where I helped with the interior design body of knowledge with Dr. Denise Guerin and Dr. Karen Martin, as well as did other studies, and I'll show you that in a moment. But ultimately ended up here after teaching at Georgia Southern University in interior design here at IWBI as community concept lead and health equity lead. So these are some of the areas that I went into with my research, excuse me. So I, as I said, talked about, again, these intersections of sustainability, of culture, of identity, and really started to see that all of the experiences that I had and all of the work experiences that I had really were coming together into something that I could really study and do research on, and also share with students in academia, as we did not have much curriculum speaking to diversity, equity, inclusion at the time, and really speaking to well-being when I started teaching at Georgia Southern University. And so I continued on with this trajectory of DEI. And so now I want to get into a little bit of research of why it is so important. So what we know is that globally over 1 billion people are disabled, and this is really getting into any type of diversity. 10 to 20% of the global population are considered neurodiverse. 84 of employers in the United States report lack of progress on building and more equitable workplaces for people of color. 45% of LGBTQ plus and United States workers are closeted at work, and more than 2 million mothers around the world left the labor force in 2000, again, based off of what we all felt with the pandemic. And so why diversity, equity, and inclusion is so important is because one, there is more likelihood to have increased stress when you are an underrepresented population. So stress has been identified as one of the top 10 determinants of disparities in health. Low-income individuals and members of racial ethnic minority groups are disproportionately exposed to stress across life domains, facing greater threats to their health, safety, and economic advancement. And then also, we understand now that trauma has been passed down through generations, and this is an intergenerational trauma that has been found in DNA at the cell level. And so these are reasons why it is so important to understand why diversity and equity and inclusion should be incorporated into the built environment, thinking about it again as preventative health. And so ways that we can do this, and this is a table that Jack Travis created with 10 Black principles of cultural design. The reason why I'm showing this to you is because I really feel that not only does it address the Black community, but it also addresses any Indigenous community as well as sustainability efforts. And so what he says is that this is not these guidelines are specifically guidelines. They are not to say that all Black people operate in this manner. They're not a monolith, but really thinking about the principles in the context that he had here. So everywhere that he went across the diaspora, the Black diaspora, he found that economy was important. Is there ease of construction? Does it make sure that the community can be involved in the building of environments? Simplicity, is the design easy to understand? Ease of construction, are communities able to be self-sufficient and to be able to build spaces for themselves? Is there ease of maintenance? Spirituality, what lies beyond? Are there elements in the design that really speaks to that? Also, heritage, symbolism, physical memory of the past, duality or irony of condition, understanding that Black people and most people of color or any person who feels marginalized or underrepresented is coexisting within a dominant culture. And then earth-centered and earth nurturing, existing with.
Excuse me, Angie, let's wrap this up because so we can have time for our last speaker and also for questions. Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
Your presentation is awesome.
Thank you. So earth-centered, earth nurturing, strong indoor-outdoor relationship. Again, both of these have to do with that indoor-outdoor presence, and then intense use of color, pattern, and texture. And so one of the things, or where I have landed with taking all of this information and all of this research, and now is here at IWBI, where I have been tasked to lead the well equity rating that we have just launched. And so I'm just showing you here the action areas that are incorporated into the well equity rating. It is a set of evidence-based strategies for looking at diversity, equity, inclusion in organizations. And it is a powerful commitment for organizations to say that they're building a culture where everyone can feel welcome, seen, and heard. And so really getting to our question about breaking down silos, really thinking about things from a whole systems perspective, understanding that everything is connected. And in interior design, especially understanding other contributions. We as interior designers often have been told that we are just picking out colors and have this great perspective in decorating, but there are many more contributions, and I believe Barbara is going to touch on that in her presentation. But then also increasing diversity of these different identities, but also diversity of thought in order to really break down silos in our building industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Scott. And so Barbara, do you want to kick it off? Take a deep breath and kick.
Okay, hang on 1 second here. I'll get going. Thank you so much. Let's see, can we see that? I don't know why it's not. There it goes. Oh, I don't want that. Okay, great. So I am going to be talking about transdisciplinary opportunities in terms of interior design. And just to give you, I'm going to quickly go through a little bit of background where this research came from, the ASID Impact Review Task Force, and some of the initiatives that were set forth at the beginning of the pandemic. And it was, this group was established to better understand how the pandemic was impacting interior designers and their clients, because much of the information that was being published was kind of best guesses, scenarios that change daily, and there was not a credible way for a lot of it to be applied to the built environment. And so this group was set up to respond to this need for reliable data and evidence during the pandemic, and to evaluate published information through a structured process. We also looked at strategies and initiative and education to advance the design of healthy and safe environments, and to look at interdisciplinary collaboration and opportunities for interior design to have a voice at the table when it came to the built environment. Part of the—
Excuse me, Barbara, you might want to put your slides on slideshow mode, because we're seeing the presentation mode, unless that's going to disrupt.
I don't know. How do I do that? Sure.
Well, let's see.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to throw you off. It's okay.
I'm not sure how to do this.
Okay, just go on back to what you were doing. I apologize.
Does anybody know? Because I do not know.
You go to display settings and you choose to swap the presenter view.
Like that?
But we're
Okay,
not
I need to share your screen.
Is that
Barbara,
right?
you were doing great. I just wasn't sure if you
Well,
knew
I don't know.
that.
Not sure what I'm doing now.
Go back to your share screen at the bottom.
I am there.
Oh, okay. So now up in the right where it says slideshow, or no, I'm sorry. See where it says from current slide? Just click right
Yes.
there. Click that.
Okay,
Chris, you can speak over here.
Yep.
I can't.
There we go.
So now you're seeing both slides. You're seeing my notes too.
Yeah, that's okay. We just know what's coming.
Barbara, you just need to hit the swap.
So
where
if
you
you
were
hit,
at.
There you go.
Okay.
Maybe I just should turn over the controls. I don't know. I'm
You're
just
doing great,
with
Barbara.
that setting. Anyway, I know we're out of time, so I'm not even sure if we should.
Yes, Barbara, keep
All
going.
right. So anyway, we
Please.
had a large interdisciplinary group We had 37 participants. We put them in teams. We did an environmental scan to launch the survey to look at issues that were impacting the built environment in the COVID era. We launched an initial survey. We had team exercises, analyzed the data, had a workshop, we did analysis. And then at the end of all of that, we established team leaders and we added technical consultants. And so in the process, we laid out 3 different phases for analysis. And this is all research that was being published at the time, 2020, late 2019 throughout 2020 and early 2021 regarding COVID. And most of the work, this research migrated in Southeast Asia over to Europe. Very little was published in the US at the time. It was just starting to emerge. And so we had all of this research that culminated in a body of knowledge that we transferred into insights briefs. And so the process that we set forth was designed as a crit because we had a large group of designers that understood what critique was in the sense of this Bauhaus environment where you had experts in the field and sort of the sage on the stage. And we combined that with the Beaux-Arts period with the Bauhaus model of collaboration. And we designed an instrument called the crit that we trained our teams on how to evaluate research from a critical perspective as it related to interior design, how it impacted lives, if it was relevant to where we were looking as far as a goal, if the solutions were innovative, if they were really going to address the issues during COVID, and if it was trusted information based on primary, secondary, published research or anecdotal firm commentary that was coming out largely at the time. And so at the end of this process, we had 200 submissions that went through a 4-step process. There were 37 reviewers. Each part took 8 hours. And at the end, we had 62 accepted content articles to build our insights briefs from. However, it wasn't quite enough at that time, so we did a lot of additional research. This is just giving you a little snapshot of what the crit instrument looked like. The articles were posted. We evaluated it on a scale of 1 to 4. We ran data and we ranked the articles. Then we got together in groups and we marked them green, go forward with it to a next level of discussion. Red, it did not meet the criteria. And then we added yellow because yellow was the color needed for designers that were on the fence about things. And so we kept those kind of in the pipeline to look at later on. We created a database of articles that were selected, and then we launched the insights briefs. From this information, 4 dominant themes emerged. Originally, we had 5 or 6. And through this process, we could identify 4 key areas of health and well-being, building design systems and technology, interior design context, which was really informing the practice specifically, and facilities and change management as key topical areas. On this slide, you'll see representation of the different kinds of firms and the multi-diversity that we had in the groups, from educators to practitioners. We had technical advisors that we added just to add a layer of credibility to our work to make sure we were not over-interpreting something or under-interpreting something. And then we had industry support from a wide range of organizations, starting with the Well Building Institute, BOMA, BIFMA, and IFMA, who were specifically all related to interior design in various types of practice. And to that purpose, we found that from that exercise, we found 5 pillars of design consciousness that we're calling them. And the context for the briefs is on the left-hand side. The pillars of design that emerged with each one of the briefs is on the right-hand side, and the scalability factor is along the bottom. And so we call this our tapestry, being good designers and trying to conceptualize this in a way that was usable for the practice. And so that was our goal, is we had to create documents that our practitioner designers were going to be able to use to communicate to different areas of practice and different parts of disciplinary work. So you see that health and well-being, for example, is contextualized on a personal level, a group level, the identification of place, an organization, and the community at large. And then we found these little crosshairs that actually we found content that filled all of these. And so we call this a little tapestry. Theoretically speaking, what we did with the briefs as well is we found that each one of these areas had influencing factors that were emerging. And one thing that we did differently with the insights briefs that was not an interior design research per se, is we linked it to a body of knowledge that was already established and out there for each one of the briefs, which I'll talk about briefly as we go through. So we mapped the content on the left with a theoretical framework on the right-hand side of this graph. And then the culmination of all of it was to inform essentials, a design strategy for the future.
Excuse me, Barbara, do you
Yes.
think you'll be able to finish up in about a minute or two?
Sure.
Thank you.
This is how building, being the context for well-being, design for trust. So anyway, these are the theoretical frameworks that went into it. The fusion of innovation, the Internet of Things, how we apply it to building systems, design for innovation, interior design context, disciplinary. This is the part where we talk about different disciplines. Iterative design process going forward. We're engaging teams, the social context for architecture, and then how the design disciplines are connecting, design for practice, facilities and change management, cultural innovation and behavior, and the context for design leadership for the future, and then the essentials that comes out of it. So we connected people, place at various levels to a design process, and resiliency towards a civil society, and equality and diversity, inclusion, and interior design at the core of it, with the various briefs and the essentials. And so design for the future and the insights briefs that are on the ASID website.
Wow. Thank you. Well, one thing that is abundantly clear to me is the thought that goes into bringing these different disciplines together from all of our panelists. It's just remarkable, sort of a winding trail Dr. Scott talked about, but a lot of thought has gone into it. So we have about 5 minutes left in this track. So any questions we don't get to online, that we don't get to right now, we will get back to you with responses to. But we have a couple of questions that have been posted. And one of them that came in was, how do you balance design? How do you balance experiences and design within groups? This is for Dr. Scott, I believe. For example, how do you allow different groups of people to feel seen and empowered and safe within the physical environment?
Okay.
That was, yeah.
Thanks, Stephanie. I think one thing that you have to, I answered this in the chat, part of it in the chat, is that understand that though community groups may have shared experiences because of disparities or inequities from society, that everyone still is different. Everyone has different sets of experiences. Everyone has different backgrounds. And so it is always best to ask them what they need. Understanding that will help you to determine what tools or resources they would need to feel, in your example, safety or secure in a space. Some of those the guidelines that I shared really spoke to really feeling a sense of belongingness, and there's a lot of literature around that, especially around DEI, and that has helped people to feel more welcome. It helps people to feel more included in spaces when they feel that sense of belongingness. There is something that is connecting them through a sense of place.
That's fantastic. The other thing that I was struck by is how passionate everyone is about what they're working on. I mean, that's just exactly what we need. One of the questions that I had about for example, the physical activity and as a way to combat obesity it seems like there can be some shame associated with obesity and also some increased difficulty with exercise. So when I extrapolate those factors into sort of the larger design process for spaces, and this is a little bit what you were just talking about, Angie, how do you allow the privacy for people to reach their own optimal performance level, whether that's weight control or academic performance, sort of, I think it's what you were just saying. How do you meet people where they are now and help them move to a better place? And how does that translate into the physical design? So if anyone wants to speak about that.
Stephanie, thanks. That's a tough question. And I do completely agree the importance of like being aware of where each individual is. I do see that trend popping up with increasing recognition. It's like in PE education as well, like what each child is ready to do, like they could be at different levels. I think that goes back to overall, we always talk about in design, giving people options. So whether it's the type of places, dimension of the places, equipment choices, when we talk about whether it's within the classroom, throughout the building, if we gave them more options to be active, and we also understand our population. So it could be when we are designing for Hispanic population, what Hispanic children are more passionate about in terms of sport, exercises, activity, or if we are designing in a school with more African American children and adolescents, the cultural difference is really important as well. So that, I guess that's always that we as designers, we always constantly need to remind us the importance of being able to understand the diversity in our population, the need to offer options as a whole. So we are not expecting every kid to be aesthetic, like really kind of playing basketball, but what do they need most? And that probably is also what would help us to be successful in changing their behavior. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that your response choices, I think that's absolutely essential. So thank you. Beg your pardon. I think we're out of time. Well, we will be in 1 minute. So if you.
Well, I was just going to say with well-being to understanding that well-being is based on where people are in their lives. So it could be different at different points of their life. They could be seeking, whether they're wanting, healthy to be more healthier or seeking purpose or financial well-being. It just depends on where they're at in their lives. And so as you were just saying, giving them options and a sense of control to be able to obtain whatever it is they're looking for is extremely helpful in well-being in the space.
Wow. Even that, what you just said, the giving people a sense of control in multiple different areas is, I can relate to that, definitely. Well, thank you. So I don't want to push things late. So let's take the wellness break and we'll move on to the next track. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Stephanie. We will reconvene at 12:25. That is in 5 minutes. So we take this wellness break for 5 minutes and I'll be back then. Thank you. Okay, I'm back. I think it's time to get started with the second track here. Can I just see a wave to make sure that somebody's in that? Cameron, are you there? Okay, great.
Right here.
Okay, so I'd like to introduce the track 2 for today. It's called Problem Solving Across Scales from Person to Community. And our moderator for this track is Mr. Cameron Ostbig. Cameron is the Director of the Board on Infrastructure and Constructed Environment and the Director of the Federal Facilities Council at the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. Cameron, I would invite you to please come, introduce yourself more, and take it from here. The panel is yours.
Thank you, Kumkum, and thank you all for joining us today for this second session titled Problem Solving Across Scales from Person to Community. As Kumkum already said, I'm Cameron Ostbig. I'm the Director of the Board on Infrastructure and Constructed Environment at the National Academies and the Director of the Federal Facilities Council. The confluence of our support for federal facilities and more generally, the built environment and its impacts on health is an opportunity to coordinate and advance areas that support and address better physical, social, and mental health with respect to the built environment and improve the performance of buildings and the occupants. In addition to my board at the National Academies, we have a number of other boards and activities that engage in this sphere, both in life sciences and in public health. And I encourage you to look at the National Academy's website for more information about those activities. The purpose of this session is to look at pathways for scaling up healthy building actions from person to large population. We will examine things like how air temperature, air quality, and air movement affect K-12 students, and how understanding the impacts of indoor air quality on students can support greater health across school communities and enhance school design. We'll also explore general concepts behind behavioral design and how they're informed by and inform policy and building guidance and rating systems like Fitwell. And lastly, we will explore building for health and the well building standards which support designing for the health and well-being and performance of the occupants of the building. These efforts demonstrate research and frameworks to span health in building ideas from person to community. As we begin our presentation, I would like to remind you to please enter your questions into the chat box. We will be moderating the questions and will offer them to the speakers at the end of the session. I'm going to introduce each speaker separately before they speak as they engage with sharing their screens. To initiate, I'm happy to introduce Dr. Josephine Lau, who is an associate professor at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln in Durham School of Architectural Engineering and Construction. She has expertise in occupant health and performance, classroom and environmental quality, demand control ventilation, air cleaning technologies, ventilation rate measurement, and related simulation. Dr. Lau served on the ASHRAE Epidemic Task Force. She's a voting member of ASHRAE GPC 37 Guidelines for Upper Room Ultraviolet Germicidal Devices to Control Transmission of Airborne Pathogens, an ASHRAE position document on indoor CO2, and an advisory board member for Fitwell certification. With this, I will turn this over to Dr. Lau.
Thank you very much, Cameron, for your nice introduction. Yeah, I'm excited today to see all of these excellent presenter and people in this virtual room. And I am going to present some of the result and finding on two particular projects that is related to healthy school. Let me share my screen. And I will do the slideshow. Do you see the one big window for a complete slide? Yep. Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, what I am going to present actually is a result of a bigger scale project, and I am one of the co-PI. And in this research project, we have graduated multiple grad students from the project. Yeah. So here I just want to acknowledge some of the names who work closely with me on the IAQ and the thermal parameters related to school environment. So I have graduated Dr. Xian Deng and Dr. Adele Kabiri Kopei in this project, but this project altogether is a 5-year-long project. Is led by my PI, my colleague, Dr. Lily Wang, and other co-PI, Dr. Clarence Water and Dr. James Bofier. So the ultimate goal for this EPA-funded research project is to look into what are the evidence-based interaction between different indoor environmental factors. There are quite a significant literature before this project being completed. We find out researchers have done some individual studies. So researchers who have an acoustical background, IAQ, or lighting background, they measure those parameters within their expertise and then try to link to student performance and how they improve or hinder learning. But there are, at least back then, there is no research project that try to integrate all these variables together, try to look at ranking them, or maybe potentially all these factors may be interacting with one another. So because a lot of time the school and the facility manager, they have very limited resource. So if they want to rank what to upgrade or what to improve, if you say all these factors are important, but they don't have the resource to improve all of them all at once. So we want to find out, are there factors that are more significant, they should be prioritized at a higher priority, or some factors may be secondary. So this is one of the reasons why we do this research, is we want to find out all these factors in one project if we can prioritize them. And then another thing that we also include the student demographic. Another thing is very unique about our project is we also include the data repeated with 3 seasons. So we measure the data in the fall season, winter season, and the spring season. So we want to see if the environmental factors change throughout the time, because a lot of time in the previous published data, we find out only 1 or 2 visits per classroom. So in this large-scale project, we try to make sure our sample size is big enough that we can have confidence we are making a good impact. We have a sample size that big enough to draw an impact. So we collected 220 classrooms in 5 local school district. We have 144 elementary classroom, 32 middle school classroom, and 44 high school classroom. Try to cover all the age group from 3rd grade, 5th grade, 8th grade, and 11th grade. And we try to do measurement during the 2 occupied day, and also some measured during the unoccupied time. So the reason why we split it is the occupied measurement will reflect or represent the exposure, how the condition is in the classroom during the normal school time. And the unoccupied measure is more for the measurement that we know that will not change whether it is occupied or unoccupied. That will not have much change throughout the time of the day. So we try to make the measurement more efficient, so we do it during the unoccupied time. And you can see this is the stand that we use on the picture on the right hand side, that we have a stand that to represent the sampler, the equipment that we put close to the teacher desk, but we also have sound level meter hanging near the ceiling, and also some light meter to record whether they use the curtain or daylighting condition. So there are a lot of data being collected. Yeah, so here is a close-up on the equipment that we used in different disciplines. But since my training is more on the mechanical system, indoor air quality, air filtration, and thermal comfort, in this particular presentation, I will go into more thermal IAQ related parameters. And also the demographics is also included in this study. So one thing that we want to include is, so since the previous track talked about equitable or the demographics to to the population. So we include this in our sample size too. Yeah, so we have whether the kids are taking free and reduced lunch, if they are gifted learners, special education, and then we have the outcome that we are try to correlate to is whether those factors that we are collecting are affecting student math or reading score. And yeah, here just to show you some demographics on the free and reduced lunch to show you that actually we do see different school districts will have different population, and sometimes we use this factor to represent what is the economic status of the family that the student come from. And then here just also once again showing you we do have variation. We want to make sure our sample size cover variation. So we have performance percentile at different grade level that at different ranking. So here I want to take a deep dive on what are the factors I do measure in the thermal comfort and IAQ parameters. For temperature or thermal comfort related factors, I included air temperature, globe temperature, and mean radiant temperature that is calculated by velocity and humidity, and the two variables that I mentioned when we do the thermal comfort analysis. And I also include relative humidity and velocity. And one thing I want to highlight before I move on to other variable, I put a picture to illustrate two things that we are doing in the practice and what I am including in my measurement when I do this research. A lot of time, yeah, this on the figure on the left is the typical thermometer, typical thermostat we use in the classroom, right? You set the air temperature you want to control, whether you want to is heating mode, cooling mode, you want to fan on, right? All these very basic features from a thermostat. So one thing that this thermostat is monitoring is only the air temperature. But what we find out when we do research on thermal comfort, how we sense the thermal environment is not just air temperature, is the globe temperature. So it includes the radiation effect. So if I have a hot surface, or if I'm sitting very close to the window, sun shining on me, on my back, on my shoulder, I will feel more heat being received on my body versus another shaded space, right? So the air temperature can be constant throughout the room, but we cannot ignore the radiation effect. And the winter time will be the same. I will feel more heat loss, cooler when I'm closer to a cooler surface. So I'm actually a great proponent to maybe we should add a globe temperature sensor somewhere in the room to better represent the true thermal sensation of the human rather than just an air temperature sensor in the HVAC control. And besides air temperature, thermal environment, I also take a deep dive on what is the indoor air quality condition in those classrooms. So we measured CO2 concentrations at different places. We have 4 different sensors, 1 put outdoor, 3 put inside the room, supply, return, and near the teacher desk. And we also measure the formaldehyde, which is known to be carcinogenic, causing lung cancer, TVOC, carbon monoxide, ozone, and I use CO2 to calculate the ventilation rate. I also measure the particle matters, and I group them fine size particle, coarse size particle from a 6-channel meter. And the next slide, I'm just showing you a typical IAQ data trend, and you will see the first day, from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. So you can see our CO2 going up and down, and particle up and down, the door open and close, to just tracking human activity and the fluctuation of those contaminants throughout the occupied time. And you can see relatively a flat curve during the nighttime, in the midnight, and we don't see any much activity. And there is a tiny spike here in the middle of midnight at 12 a.m. That is weird. And a lot of time we find out that sometimes it's maybe suddenly turn on or off. That mechanical system on off will stir up a spike on some reading. Yeah, but they will go back to the baseline very quick. And yeah, so here the next day, around 8 a.m. again, then you see the similar pattern as the first day, activity and particle CO2 going up and down. So when we are averaging our data, we always only focusing on the occupied average. We don't just take the average of the entire 36 hours. We really want to find out what the student exposure is when we process those data. So here I want to give you some brief descriptive statistic about the thermal data. So first of all, we don't see much air temperature variation in all 3 seasons, and that is very expected because we find out that all the room are mechanically controlled. They have a very tight thermostat set point. They don't switch their temperature set point in winter or summer or any season. They try to fix it around 72 to 74. Yeah, so that's a very narrow temperature that they control, and they keep this temperature throughout all the 3 seasons. But one thing we find out in terms of thermal factors in the different seasonal variation that we find out is the relative humidity. In the wintertime, we see the room more drier. They are at the 20 to 40 relative humidity rather than the usually suggested, the box shift, I apologize, is the suggested comfort range is usually 40 to 60% relative humidity. So there is a drier season in the winter time, yeah, because most of the time the classroom do not have additional humidifier. Then another thing I want to present, yeah, for the IAQ descriptive data, I have a lot more, but I only focusing on ventilation rate and CO2. First of all, we don't see too much variation in the CO2 throughout the 3 seasons, but we use the CO2 concentration to calculate our ventilation rate. When we extract the data to ventilation rate, 2 things I want to highlight. One is actually only 20% to 25% of the classroom satisfy ASHRAE standard. Yeah, that's a standard that gives you what is the best practice when you ventilate non-residential buildings. So this is 62.1. And they mandated all the classroom environment should have at least 6.7 liter per second per person, and only maybe 1/5 to 1/4 of the classroom met the standard. And when we look into the seasonal variation, one thing we also find out very interesting is there are less classroom in the wintertime that met the ASHRAE standard requirement. So we see more room in the spring and fall, they met ASHRAE standard, but in the wintertime they are less. So once again, we see that seasonal variation, and we are happy that we are one of the first team that capture the seasonal variation in the school environment that before our study. We don't see much literature mentioning that. So now at the one research question that we want to answer is, do any of these thermal, IAQ, environmental factor associate or affecting student learning? So here are some observed effects. So we run a multilinear regression, and at the end here are the association that we find out if we increase the globe temperature in the wintertime, increase the air temperature in the wintertime, they are correlated to higher math score or higher reading score. And you see here in the springtime, you see a lower globe temperature will have a better math score. So here, similar trend, higher air velocity associated to lower reading score, and higher air velocity in the fall associated to higher reading score. Yeah, I know this is a lot of relationship to study, but one thing we find out that, yeah, this also align with this relationship align with the thermal comfort preference during different seasons. In the wintertime, we prefer warmer environment for more comfort. In the summer or spring or early fall or late spring, we will prefer cooler environment for comfort. So we can see that, yeah, if the conditions are closer to the comfort preference, we will see higher learning outcome. And then for the IEQ, we also find out, in this, if we increase the formaldehyde in the fall, there are correlation with a lower math score. The classroom with unit ventilator have lower math score, and the classroom with unit ventilator, we also find association with lower ventilation rate, higher noise level, and they are associated to lower math score. So there are a lot more factors, ozone particle, also related, affecting to reading score. So if you want to learn more, I have published this paper, and this is a first cover page, the screenshot of this paper that we reported our result in detail. And everything that we have studied so far are the focusing on performance. And this is another paper that I also look into, absenteeism. Because we want the student come to the class, we want them to stay learning. So, and we already have literature find out if the student have low attendance, extended absenteeism, then that means they don't have time in the classroom to learn the material. So at the end, it's ultimately affect the student learning. So one thing we find out in this pilot study, we find out that if we increase the particle count, there will be an increase in illness-related absenteeism. So IRA stands for illness-related absenteeism. So we try to exclude if it is just family vacation, they go trip, and any other thing non-health, not health related, then we exclude. So this IRA is really a sickness-related absenteeism. And then another thing besides particle, we also find out if the room have an increase in the CO2 concentration, there is also an increase in sickness-related absenteeism. So here, once again, you will find a lot more details on this, another published paper that summarize this result. And then here, I want to highlight all the data that I've presented in this presentation so far are only correlation. So it's observational study, it's not cause and effect, because we didn't manipulate the classroom condition. We just observe what is the existing condition with a very large sample size. But we are very fortunate now we have a follow-up study that is more experimental based. So with funding from Nebraska Department of Education, we are going to manipulate the school environment by adding additional air filter. So we have 3 types of air filter that we selected. One is HiBR filter, one is HiBR with active carbon. The third one is HiBR active carbon plus UV light. So we have 3 different air treatment device. And also we have classroom installed with placebo. So a fake device that just with fan. So to rule out any psychological influence on the student outcome. So what we will do in this study is just started this year, early January. We randomly assign these 4 types of treatment, including the placebo classroom randomly. So the student don't know which room they are in, the teacher don't know, only those who install the device, we know which room are the with and without treatment. And we will try to link those classroom student absenteeism and student learning outcome to what we find from this study. So hopefully with this study, we can find out more confident how indoor space are improving learning or hinder learning. So, and I also included a website that will summarize my current research project.
Josephine, if we could wrap it up in the next couple minutes, please. Thank you.
Yep. With that said, I also give you some suggestion for those practitioners or who are doing active design every day. Here are the factors that you can consider when you are doing classroom design. And with our research project, what one of our goals is, we want to find out what are the parameters that will help student learning, and at the end, the school can take action to put their limited resource to improve the condition or environment that will really impact the student learning, or also give information to the design community. What are the factors you can improve and pay attention when you design classroom environment to promote student well-being and student learning performance? And I just want to acknowledge we have a big team work with us to collect all the data, do the data analysis. And if you want to learn more, yeah, feel free to go to the website. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josephine. Fantastic work. Very interesting. A lot of discussion in the chat box, and I think we'll have some good questions for you at the end of this. Our next speaker is Dr. Joel Kimmons, who's a senior nutrition scientist and epidemiologist at the CDC Division of Nutrition, Physical Activity, and Obesity. Dr. Kimmons focuses on environmental and behavioral design approaches to creating healthy and sustainable places to live, work, and play. Dr. Kimmons developed and manages the scientific aspects of Fitwell, a healthy building rating and certification program. Dr. Kimmons, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, let me trying to get to share screen thingy here. There we go, share screen. Let's see, let's share that screen. Let's see if that works. All right, can you all see?
Looks good.
All right, okay, good. And I have a little bit of construction in the background, so I'm just gonna say that I might have to just move in a minute, and apologize for that, but can't do much about it. So Josephine, I thought your presentation was excellent. I'm so glad this work is being done, because that work is upstream of a lot of what you all hear me talk about here. What we know is ooh, I don't like that noise. I'm not gonna move y'all. I'm just gonna walk out here. Y'all probably can't see me moving. Y'all prefer me outside anyway, because it's got a better ventilation and better temperature and better lighting, right? Although you may not notice it. Okay. So I'm talking about using behavioral design to make healthy choices easier. And I'll say up front, I would love to see things in the chat or questions afterwards. Critical of the way I go with some of these things, or supportive either one. But I'll say I've had pushback on things like healthy choices to make an easy choices going together as concepts. And I'll say I don't really sync with that criticism. I actually think that it's sort of a right and a privilege, and something you should expect, that your life is situated in such a way that most of the choices around you are healthy, and that those healthy ones are easy, and that the less healthy things are harder to get to. And that's just a good way to sort of lay out your life. And that's sort of behavioral design, but it's a good way for society to lay out the lives of all people. And I've had some people sort of say that this could lead to things like such as victim blaming. And I just want to really push back on that and saying, that sounds like a really privileged position to be in. But I think we should organize society to make it easier on people. This isn't blaming anyone, this is saying we can make it better. So I'm going to spend most of this presentation on, on backgrounds. I'm sure I spend 15 minutes just talking about this concept of behavioral design, because there are many different areas I'm drawing from when I talk about behavioral design. And I think it's critical that the community of people that are on this call have been involved in HiBR over the years really start to become fluid in the way they think about a taxonomy of connecting design, engineering to behavioral outcomes. And even the terminology we use, what do we call this? So the media has been taken over and popular language has been taken over by terms such as nudge, right? Or even choice architecture. I don't know what the hell nudge means. Is it hit over the head with a sledgehammer, or is it putting something first in a choice line? I don't know. They're poorly defined terms. They're out of popular books. And I just want to push back and say that not just an academic community, but as a practice community, as a policymaking community, we need to start using terms that are more effective driving situations. So anyway, so that's partly sort of the why I'm gonna focus on these background slides so much. Also, I'm focusing on these background slides because these are pretty basic for most people that are probably on this call. I'm happy to share these slides. I'm asking you to pirate these slides, change them, use them. These are relatively good ideas that need to be developed, or maybe you'll like them as they are, but let's try to push these ideas forward, because I think ultimately they'll have a lot of consequence. I've drawn from many people. I owe many people thanks to where these slides are, all the way back to the 70s and Terry Pochek, when some of these concepts were actually developed during the work with smoking back in the 70s. So these concepts go way back. They have a real history. I owe many mentors thanks for these slides. and these concepts. So I want to start out by just giving an overview, two sort of conceptual overviews that all of us are somewhat familiar with, but they don't necessarily go where we think they will. So one is the socio-ecologic model, and that I will show you in a minute. You all should probably be all aware of the socio-ecologic model. And two, this is sort of my way to get to the socio-ecologic model. And this does ultimately come from the 1976 Auto Health Convention on Smoking, which coined the term making the healthy choice the easier choice and began to move tobacco and cigarettes away from easy access. So what you get on the left is you have the individual family group, very close to personal agency issues. On the right here, you have overall environment or exposure area. So you have the agent on the left, exposure on the right. Experience is what we all live. That happens down the center here. That's, what happens while we're busy making other plans, right? Paul Simon said it best. And so what we're interested in is what happens in the moment, right? But what happens in the moment is ultimately dependent on what can happen in the moment. So how you organize yourself, you can't really eat what's not in the fridge, but you do eat what is in the fridge, right? So you set these things up. And so that's set up generally from an individual perspective, you do the buying and so forth. But ultimately it's controlled by the environmental perspective because that's where the grocery store is. That's what's in the grocery store. But there's responsibility across the sector. And I think different groups in society make it a point to find identity by suggesting that the power should lie at the left or right of this diagram. Ironically, I have the diagram somewhat left backwards to the American left and right. I think that's nice because it's a ridiculous thing to be on the left or right. These are scientific issues that can be explored scientifically. And what we know is making good decisions, living a healthy life requires both the support of society, the support of family, the support of groups, and ultimately the individual has to make those things work. But we do need to support each other and support, give each other a bit of a break, help each other. So on the individual side, you get things like behavioral design. I'm not going to say anything about behavioral design now. Everything here is behavioral design. Very generic term. That's why we use it. Behavior and design, thrown together. But you have individual agency, individual ability. This is, you get the idea of free will here. We're not talking about free will today much. I will say that free will is a silly idea because I don't know of any other thing in the world. Universe, what's bigger than a universe? Multiverse that is free. So nothing's free. So I doubt will is free. Roy Baumeister's made this clear very poignantly, saying that will is not free. You pay for it somewhere. The individual skills, knowledge, these fit in the family and group well, relationships to time. So we'll talk a little bit more. And then values and norms of exposure. Now these values and norms of exposure, these go down underneath this ball that the guy or the woman is pushing up the hill here. And the values and social structures down here. So you have values, social structure, and cultural norms. These are hard to move. Like if we just change the values, social structure, and cultural norms of society, boom, we'd be done. Everything will get better, right? Those are difficult to move. So moving that fulcrum, even though that's where the massive amount of power is in the fulcrum, as all the architects here know, that's hard to do. So how do you do it? Well, you have to make the left side lighter and the right side heavier. So you go over to the right side here, you really get two things here in environment. You have the ways to change the environment, and you have the changes in the environment. And ultimately what you want to do is make things accessible, affordable, and sustainable. Nothing really works. I put sustainable last in all these lists because nothing works here if it's not sustainable. We keep dumping money into it from the government. We keep, iterating it over and over and over again. We're not getting anywhere. So the more we can build things, that's why I love the building world. We're actually building things into the real world. Okay. So this is where we take that slide and we turn it into more just directly behavioral design, lingo thinking, position. Okay, so what is behavioral design and how I'm talking about it? So it's strategies that enable and incentivize, okay? So the incentivize part is maybe information, the enable part is maybe, a physical change of how you actually access things, right? And then I mentioned healthier choices and actions. And this is sort of part of that, back to the sort of free will comment. Sometimes you make an active choice, right? That takes a lot of work. Oops, sorry, let's go back up. That takes a lot of work. Mostly during our days, we make actions. You don't think deeply about everything you do. And for those people who think that we should think deeply about everything we do, you're just being naive because that would wear you out. You need to save the actual really cognitive choices for the really important times. These are important things. This is when you're reacting to your kids or to your family or to your significant other, to your other family members, to your workmates, This is when you really need to be conscious and active, make important choices, right? Those happen, right? But most of the actions in the day, you just need to get up and put some clothes on. And so you keep the same clothes in your closet and you just have healthy food in the fridge. And so those actions don't need to be thought through. So the more things you can remove out of that, gosh, I have to think through this, the better. Comes to the bank account, make it a, you know, make it a time when you're gonna put some deliberate effort into it. So how does that work? How does that work in our brains? There's a thing called dual process theory, which is made up and doesn't really exist, but it's a theory and it describes this well. I mean, it's made up, meaning it doesn't really have physiological reality. We're okay with that because it generally does play out that people have this general kind of machine within their cognitive structure. And part of that is what I call the well-fed model, because I'm a nutrition scientist at heart and by training. And so, you know, you've had a good meal, you're not hungry, you go to the grocery store and you read labels and think about stuff, you're very deliberate, you're very economic, you look at the prices, gosh, does this, you know, do I know from my nutrition information, is this evidence-based that it's gonna be good for me? You make really good choices based on information and resources. Or that's part of the dichotomy. The other part is you're hungry, you got 3 kids stringing along behind you, and they're hungry, and you're just grabbing stuff in the grocery store with that cart left and right. You know, you want, and the kids are throwing stuff in there. It's hot, emotional. You're driven by just whatever's there. The grocery store is telling you exactly what they want to sell you. They've laid it out, they've designed it, and you're picking the stuff off the end caps. You're getting the stuff by the cash register, and you walk out with a lot of yummy stuff, but maybe not the best dietary things. Okay, so behavioral design is about how we sort of game this system, right? So how do we game this to help people? Because you're not going to always be able to be in this left-hand deliberative state. And maybe you don't always want to be there. You know, you want to be a little passionate and impulsive sometimes in that right. But then on either side of this, ideally, you could make better decisions, right? And some of us just don't tend towards the right side of this, the left side of it, the deliberate side of it very much. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. So behavioral design is sort of how do we game that system through the layout of our environment. And so overall, we've drawn from a lot of fields. I'd say environmental psychology is the core field that I've drawn from. I think it's a really great field, but also all the fields you all are involved in. I'm sure the environmental psychology connected people here, but everything from architecture to design to the arts, of course, psychology, and of course, things like behavioral economics, which really started these ideas. However, I don't really consider that a field. It's just economics with some behavior thrown in. I would prefer to say cognitive science when you talk about drawing, and then you get the whole field and whole area of, you know, why do I think the way I think? How does this fit in? So here we go to the core model of behavioral design that we drew up from a project with INCOR, the National Collaborative Childhood Obesity Research, about 5 or 6 years ago. And we broke it out into sort of 3 events are going on here. You have the agent, that's you. That's the you don't really know, by the way. And then you have exposure. That's everything you're exposed to, inside and outside. Okay. And then what you experience in the moment is experience, right? That's how you see it. That's how you hear it. That's how you feel it. That's where most of it goes down. And interoception is a word that is not well enough known. That is your sensory experience from the inside of your body. So that's your tummy rumbling, and that's your kidneys working. That's things you may or may not notice, right? So when I say your experience, well, it's your experience. It builds your total experience, but you may not have, you know, the awareness to know that your heart is beating at, you know, 80 beats per minute. There are people that do. I don't. There are people who can pick up that kind of stuff. And so interoception is actually a current hot field of research. It's incredibly important. It fills in you have your exterior sensory input, and you have your interoception, which is your interior sensory input. These both build and inform the agent for being in the world. Exactly what the agent is are we a brain? Who knows? That's theory of mind down at the bottom. I don't know if we're a brain. I don't know if we're brain into that. I don't know if this is a simulation. None of that really matters, but theory of mind sort of explores that idea. You are this, you know, the eyeballs looking out of this exposure. We have personhood. We all have beliefs, facts, evidence. That's the agent side. On the exposure side, it's the world around us. It's the world that people in this call build. It's our buildings. It's our communities. It's the people that annoy us. This is, you know, there's several areas here that are really important, like information, exactly what that means and how that informs us. But all these others, and I do highlight a few of these, like biology, because our exposure is so tied to biology, right? Just so solid. We're just not different, right? So biology and psychology fit very strongly into this theory of mind agency because they flow through exposure immediately into our biology, into our psychology, and become theory of mind without us really doing any work or any processing. Just like when I say words, most of them you are forced to understand. When I ask a question, what is your name? Your brain, what is your name? What is your name? You're forced to answer that without, it's a strange force, right, that we have. We just do these things. That's our biology and psychology. So this is sort of the ultimate background of behavioral design. And so we looked at that and we came up with our own sort of sociological approach. And this is that sociological approach. And I will sort of compare the sociological model in a minute. But this is from the National Collaborative for Child BC research. And we sort of said that when you're going to do something like build a building, build a room, build a school, there are aspects that we need to consider. The individual, right? Social group level, how those interact, the space, what the space looks like, economics, time, atmosphere, information. This is a lot of information on this slide. That's why it's so small. That's why y'all can't necessarily read it. It's on the website. The whole paper is based really on this diagram. There's a lot of information here. Is this correct? No. Nothing's correct, really. We're doing our best. I know you all are doing your best as well, but this is a very good place to begin. I would love to discuss with anyone how to make this whole concept better. So let me just put this concept into more general terms that we all work with. So sociological model, this is the biblical model of public health. I love this model because it really helps me explain to other people who aren't in public health how individuals relate to the rest of the world and how policy is important and how all these different parts of the sociological model are important. But I can't stand the sociological model because it's non-functional. It tells me nothing about how to do anything. I don't know any of the relationships that fit within these. And there's been a lot of attempts to sort of put band-aids on this model. Sometimes, it's just gonna look like a mummy after a while because there's no band-aiding at this problem. But it's good for explaining. It's just not good for being actionable.
Joel,
So
you have about 3 minutes.
All right, sounds good. So I took the sociological model apart here. And what I did was I put in behavioral design aspects that I mentioned before from the NCORE with strategies to change things. And so what you see across the sociological model is in a connection between the aspects and the strategies for change. So we're going to skip this slide and skip this slide. Those are the details on those. Now, this whole session was really pinned on how do we expand from the individual to the community level. And so we've done in the federal government is we've said that we have standards. We know things about nutrition. This comes from the dietary reference intakes, right? And that we can build guidelines, like dietary guidelines for Americans. And we can take those guidelines, we can build those into programs that actually certify things such as FitWell. And so that's what we've got here is individuals, businesses, all the way up to cities with a STAR index, right? And those areas can address many different issues from health, economics, business. And so you have this broad way to go about it. And I'm going to run through 3 in 2 minutes here. I'm going to run through 3 examples of doing this. So at the individual level to the group level, we took the dietary guidelines for Americans and we turned them into food service practice. So these are just dietary guidelines for Americans, very directly translated so the food service operators can serve healthy food. Very simple, very easy. And right now there's a White House conference and we hope that they make this, these guidelines, which I wrote in 2010 for the first time and are now in their 2nd edition, we're hoping they become very widely used in the federal government thanks to the current White House discussion going on this very moment. We had other types of food service guidelines. Food service guidelines do lots of things. And then after food service guidelines, we thought, well, why don't we take those guidelines, food, and a bunch of other guidelines that other groups do and that other expertises, and put them all into a building strategy. And this was done between us, CDC and GSA. And I was the CDC person and Melissa Walker was the GSA person. And the 2 of us worked on FitWell for a number of years. It's a beautiful program. It's a beautiful concept. We have beautiful competitors, which you can hear from in a minute, with Well, love them too. And so these ideas of building rating systems for health just make so much sense. And you can address so many different areas. You can achieve so much in so many different areas. Now, I'll say, how do you get to the details, right? And so FitWell has a lot of details. How do you dig down and get all the way down to the base? And so with behavioral design, we took the general processes you saw earlier, me talking about behavioral design at this sort of deep level. And we created this ridiculous checklist, and I created it so you can call me ridiculous. I'm calling myself ridiculous, so it's the way it is. But took this almost annoying checklist of all the little tiny things you can change in your cafeteria, your vending operation, or your micro market to change people's behavior. And so that's what this new guide, Behavioral Design Guidance for Food Service Operations, it is, it's not posted on the web. I apologize. It's very close to being posted on the web. Give me a couple of weeks. But so this is our latest release from CDC. I'm very proud of it, very excited about it. It's not breathtaking, but it's sort of detailed, so it gets people there, and I hope it helps. But it's also sort of a first draft of a good concept. And we did categories, so these are categories, lots of categories. Placement, layout, innovations, pricing, tableware information, organizational policy, and then we drew evidence for each one, and they're as good as they can be. The evidence here is never rocket. I want to trust getting in a rocket with it, but it's evidence. And so the last two slides here are just resources, and most of the information I've talked about is here. So thank you very much for your time. I'd love to answer any questions, and hope I've not confused and a little bit inspired. Back to you, Cameron.
Thank you, Joel. Very, very inspiring. What a great demonstration of taking individual guidance and turning it into community programs and community guidance and standards, and a great introduction and definitions for behavioral design concepts. I'm very happy now to introduce our last speaker, Whitney Austin Gray, who is the Senior Vice President at the International Well Building Institute, where she leads the research that supports best practices in building design and operations, community development, and organizational policies. She holds a dual appointment as an adjunct assistant professor at Georgetown School of Nursing and Health Studies and the Department of Urban and Regional Planning. She's the co-founder of NIH's Health in Buildings Roundtable and an advisory board member at the Cornell Institute for Healthy Futures and the International Academy of Health and Design. Whitney?
Hi, thank you, everyone. It's such a joy and honor to be with this brain trust today at such a critical moment in history to talk to you about the building health movement. Am I looking and sounding good? Can everyone see the right slides here before we? All right, launch off. Perfect. So I want to start with a quote. This is by Magahed and Goem in 2020 that said, "Life after the pandemic will never be the same. Values, life's habits will have changed, and our architecture will change under the influence." I find that quote to be a call of action. As I teach my students about the history of the built environment and health, I teach about the past and the things that we've learned when epidemics have reared their ugly head. In public health, we knew this pandemic was coming. We did not know the name, we did not know the year, but we knew how bad it could get. And it will fundamentally shift our design. It will shift our urban design and our structures. And if it doesn't, then we've missed the mark. So I struggle that when I'm teaching about this moment in time, the research is literally developing as we speak. This is the first fall I am returning to speaking publicly. This 2-year period of pandemic, I also had a little toddler boy who keeps me very, very busy and also drives me to understand what will be the future of health for him and what are we learning right now. And as we are speaking more publicly, I will say that there in general, I think, is a feeling of optimism, finely tuned with a feeling of overwhelm. What's the future direction? Can we go there? How do we go there? Can we go there together? And also, I'm overwhelmed at even where to start. So I want to invite you into that. That's not a bad thing. That means we need to critically look at where we're at. We need to join forces. And the group on this line needs to help shape what I would call the building health movement. I want to make a very critical point here that I consider all of you part of our family at the International Building Institute and beyond. Your work, your contributions, and your research, whether you're involved in well or not, we consider you to be part of this movement and part of this family. We need you so deeply to be able to really think critically about this future and defining this moment in time. One of my mentors and a governance council member at IWBI, former Surgeon General Richard Carmona, has come forward to elevate this topic that buildings really are a solution to foster wellness and deliver positive health outcomes. This gives me chills. Many people on the line, they'll look at this quote and say, of course. And other people will say, It's taken us a long time to get a Surgeon General to that. And it was buildings and the built environment was not even listed specifically when we look at Healthy People 2010. It was sort of hidden under environmental health issues. And we have grown and we have built this industry and we have built the sector of research, and we still have a lot further to go to elevate the built environment as a solution to multiple health outcomes that we've heard discussed today. It unifies. However, in the most loving and critical moment, NIH does not have a center for the built environment. We study diseases. We don't always study health promotion. I'm glad that's starting to change, but I will still continue to argue the built environment studies multiple aspects, and there needs to increasingly be interdisciplinary groups like this that are elevating these topics across those different centers. So the International Well Building Institute, we are focused on creating people first places, and we really aim to be a trusted authority on health and well-being, not only for buildings, but clearly for the people inside them. You can design a very healthy building that no one is in, as we have found during the pandemic. Since our launch in 2014, we have elevated over 7,000 peer-reviewed studies and citations. I was so excited to see all the research presented today. If you have not been in direct contact with us, if you don't already sit on an advisory for us, please do reach out. Please do share those articles. I was thrilled to see the school's research. I was just presenting on that last week. We need all of this trusted authority, and we need to be able to translate it into a standard. The key about a standard is that it evolves. The research isn't, when the things research is done doesn't understand it. We don't perfectly get it because we have to work with a lot of innovators in the field that even when we do understand circadian lighting in the eye, that does not mean that there's an accessible, affordable solution across all building typologies. So we have work to do, and not just understanding the human environmental interaction, but then what do we do to translate that into a standard and then spur on innovation in the industry, and then truly look at business case, affordability and accessibility, and then evaluation, so we can do it all over again. That is the backbone of our work at the International Building Institute, and research sits centered to that. We engage with over 20,000 industry leaders and practitioners. Looking through the brain trust on the line today, and my ask to all of you is to, again, please serve on an advisory. Please do reach out. We actually are opening nominations right now for our research advisory, and or elevate someone in your field or someone junior that you work with to be part of this discourse. We have over 30,000 locations enrolled, and we engage over 500 evidence-based interventions within the well building standard. In total, we have 108 features in the well building standard that sits over 10 different concept areas. And this is what happened during the pandemic. So when I was asked to give a presentation about how to scale this research today, I don't think there's a better slide to demonstrate that before COVID, I call it BC times, we were looking at 400 million square feet that we're working with the WELL program. We are at 4 billion. This should give everyone chills. These are the same, look at these bars over here. This is the same groups that said, we don't need it. There were some major players, Fortune 500s, that said maybe later, too expensive. Why should we monitor our air quality? Why should we test water? We don't need to do that. There's already a water standard in this nation. These were groups that said, what are you talking about? Mental health in the built environment. There's strategies for that. I'm an architect leading that. What? And now they have come to recognize the critical role that places make. This is a huge opportunity for us. And as challenging as this time has been, we know deeply in public health, you prepare for these moments. So you step up, you step in, you educate, you provide solutions, and you run, because people are looking at these issues now. I don't want them to forget. I want to evolve environments, because the chilling thing for me when I look at everything we've learned about air quality in this pandemic, and this comes from our experts on our air quality concept lead, is that we knew so much of this. The majority of strategies in air quality, we knew. We just hadn't actually translated them into practice, whether that was funding, whether that was challenges in innovation, manufacturing, and access, but we knew so much. So when I look at this and I say, how do you scale? This is critical that people have stepped up and in, and organizations are getting this. And they're looking at the built environment as a solution for health. And it is a critical time for us. So at the International Building Institute, we also had to think deeply that will we make the change? Will we lead a movement one building at a time? I can tell you so many countless stories of large organizations that certified one well building, and yet they had 100 right behind them. And we had to dig in. This is not something that's ever been taken on by other certification programs in the same way, to really move from single building to organization level. And we're up to something really big, and we need all your help with it. So WELL is not about certifying one building or certifying a brand new office. This is about certifying any and all places and spaces that you spend time in. We are moving into WELL for homes, specifically standing up a task force looking at that issue. We do not have separate standards for those different sectors. They are all under one WELL, but we do stand up advisories that have excellence in that space, all the way to looking at community centers, and we have some big stadiums that we've worked with, and everything in between. These are all different building typologies that can pursue and be part of the WELL family. We also deeply looked at this issue of, do we tell our clients what we have, or do we listen to what they want? And we have done a lot of work to say, maybe we don't tell them about air quality, but maybe we hear from them about what their goal is around enhancing climate and sustainability, around prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then we line up the features that support that pathway. We also stood up a series of ratings to specifically meet those clients' needs. If they want to focus in health and safety during a critical time where most buildings were shut down, we have to stand up a system. We can't wait for it to fit the way that we did business. And we led in that way, and it was incredibly exciting. We are now standing up the WELL performance rating, which I'll talk to you a little bit about, which we saw major players in this field. And this is the Carriers and the Trains and the Honeywells all developed different certifications during the pandemic. And we said, actually, this is what we do. Can you all come together and agree we're stronger together than apart? Let's focus on performance. And we set up that rating. So when I'm asked about scale, I think we have to move away from telling. We have to move away from one building into listening, into scaling, and to adaptability and adjusting. And as we take these organizations on a journey with WELL at scale, we need numbers. I hope I'm silently hearing everyone nod that I can't see on video right now, because I do not go to another conference where someone tells me they have a healthy building and absolutely no data. They have a great guideline, a great checklist, and I pat them on the back because they're halfway there, and that's all part of this work. But I need you to go further. I need numbers. I need to elevate the performance testing and industrial hygiene industry in this field. I need to see water quality testing parameters. I need to see building monitoring systems. We need to see what are we doing, and we need to elevate an industry that makes it accessible. If it's really expensive for one building to do this, how am I going to get an entire portfolio of Fortune 500 companies track air quality and calibrate their sensors on a regular basis? This is what we are up to. And we are on a pathway with clients. This does not get solved overnight. This example of our work with Uber, constantly iterating, looking at a rating, looking at a standard, coming back, looking at scaling, looking at how they're using these reports and numbers around ESG. We also took a step back and said, we're real comfortable talking to chief sustainability officers. I love presenting to designers and architects. I feel so at home in this space. But how do we step outside of that? How do we get chief financial officer or a chief diversity officer? Even those leading ESG strategy, we're finding to be an incredible door in to saying, oh, you test, track, and measure every single year what is material for your organization to your shareholders and stakeholders. Oh, guess what? Health material. We're going to help you report that. So this means we all speak different languages, and as PhDs, we are trained to speak our own. We like our own. I encourage everyone to say, I don't know, to reach across the table. I frequently find myself in the world of what's the acronym and I don't know. And then as soon as I ask it, I think it's really funny because people will laugh and sometimes not even be able to know what the acronym is. We speak all these different languages. Be humble enough to recognize that we're transdisciplinary. We don't have necessarily centers in the same way that other disease-focused areas do, which means we have to speak the language of multiple disciplines to do that. And turns out we don't like to do that alone. We also ask ourselves, how do we create jobs? How do we generate revenue for companies? How do we elevate experts in the field that actually consult with their clients every single day? We're a building certification system. We have to be agnostic in our work, but these groups actually stood up the Well Enterprise Provider Program, Ernst & Young being the first, followed by many others that you see, such as PwC and JLL and Moser, et cetera, that said, we know our clients, we know what they need, we are the consultant. We are going to work with you at Well at Scale, not for 1 year, but for 5 years, for 10 years. And I didn't actually even mention our Well at Scale program. You don't even have to pursue Well to be part of it, but you have to create a roadmap and you have to have a target. And these are the groups that are stepping up to help us do this at scale globally. I mentioned before that we are speaking the language of different industries. A very near and dear issue in my heart is understanding the business case. I've seen too many beautiful research studies followed by beautiful innovations that lead to absolutely no change. This is speaking the language of the industry, and we have done that really through accelerating our work with ESG. I'm going to go rapidly over this section, but I just want everyone to know the resources. So we directly work with UN SDGs, for example, with our clients, because Well will have 80% of UN SDGs. In a recent analysis of the top 15 global real estate companies, we know that of the top 2 leading issues in UN SDGs that are reported, it's good health and well-being. Yet it's so poorly reported still. We love Welltower, and we're thrilled about what they're doing to demonstrate on their UN SDG number 3 on good health and well-being that they're pursuing well. That's great. But when you look at the column at the top, there's a lot of words. If you look down at UN SDG 13, there's a lot of numbers, which means if we're going to prove that health is material, we need to move to numbers. We need to start having specificity in reporting and tracking for companies, right? We have to move from effort to effect in that reporting. In early 2022, we launched the 12 competencies for measuring health and well-being for human and social capital at NASDAQ. We welcomed in several pilot projects that were up to saying, we need to report health as material, we need to move from words to numbers, and we can't just report on how many mindfulness apps or health insurance claims or how many days lost to the workplace through injury. That's not enough. 75% of our workers are knowledge workers in industrialized countries. We need to start asking about psychological safety and thriving and employee effectiveness. We've undergone a very intensive review, but we put forward as the 12 competencies that need to be measured by companies when they're reporting on human and social capital. I'm joined on the line today by Dr. Angela Loader on my team, who has really helped to lead the development of these measurement categories very, very deeply, working across disciplines such as environmental psychology, but also digging deep into the worlds around health and well-being, trying to understand the business language behind how we're tracking and measuring some of these metrics, and of course, incorporating new metrics and evolving metrics on issues such as DEI. If you'd like to learn more about that, we published a 2-part series with Deloitte this past year, specifically on well-being as a cornerstone for ESG strategy and reporting. If you've never heard of ESG, give us a shout. We'd love to talk to you about it and kind of introduce you to some of that language. If you know everything about it and like to be involved, also give us a shout. We would love to share more. I'll leave you with a couple of resources here. So the last is the Global Research Agenda. This is the first global agenda that we are aware of on health, well-being in the built environment, which is a culmination of multiple years of work by 20 global research advisors. And as part of that, we actually launched a series on impact topics. Each quarter, we feature one of these impact topics. These are not numerically ranked. They are impactful, timely, and relevant. I'm thrilled that in this pandemic world, we've actually been able to garner around 1,000 participants per webcast. Please join us. Please download even if you can't and take a walk in the woods. Maybe that's the best way. And share this conversation, because one of the biggest things we're doing as an institute, as the International Well Building Institute, is saying that research is not only about sharing the answers that you have, but asking the really hard questions of the industry and sharing where you are. And that really is the ethos behind this work. I want to elevate all the incredible partners, several on the line today, that are part of this research advisory, and say that applications are open for 2023. We'll be moving into the next version of the Global Research Agenda. And so invite you to elevate your topic and deeply be part of that. I know that I can't see everyone on camera, some people that I can, and I'm looking at you and thinking about you to be involved in this. So please, please do pass this on. Again, share with your junior researchers and others. Also, stay tuned. We just published the largest analysis of a multi-office cohort pursuing WELL certification to date. This is hot off the press, and this is multiple years in the making. I could not be more thrilled at this work. You'll be hearing a lot more from us. This is powerful, powerful work to say we have an intervention. We test and measure it objectively, subjectively across multiple offices that have demonstrated proof. So more on that to come. I think what I'll do there is I'm going to close out. I have two other rating systems that I was going to talk about today. Dr. Angie Scott previewed our equity rating. And I also previously mentioned in this presentation our performance rating. So if you'd like to learn a little bit more about that, please do give us a shout. Again, these are really opportune time for researchers to stay engaged. And I think I'll skip to the end to again welcome the family to be part of this movement of leaders in talking and sharing and elevating and provoking and speaking different languages. You do not need to be in a WELL project to be part of the work that we are up to. So we invite you to join us in that. And I really just want to reiterate that scaling means very critical questions that are not comfortable, that we could be in the same room with everyone that speaks the same language. Getting uncomfortable, scaling, thinking about revenue, thinking about a tough world moving into inflation, recession, understanding issues around mental health that go way beyond even air quality issues, understanding everything from quiet firing to quiet quitting. These are all really relevant, timely issues that we're up to, and invite you to be part of that conversation with us. I'm boycotting business cards until I'm told I can't. So this is my LinkedIn QR code. I think it works on the computer screen. It's worked recently in a couple of conferences. As a apologetic extrovert in the pandemic, I prefer to be in a room and feel your energy. But since I can't, please do give me a shout on LinkedIn. Let me know what you're thinking and stay connected. It's been an honor to be with you today. Thanks all.
Thank you, Whitney. You know, no doubt COVID has elevated the discussion of our built environment and the impact on health. And the graphic of just the square footage under the WELL process or WELL standard is just amazing to see that growth. We've all of our speakers today have provided very deep content, and as such, I was letting them run out and provide as much content as they could to the audience. So I really appreciate all of that information, and I hope that they can provide that so our audience can use it in the future. Yeah, I'm very glad that Joel and Whitney talked about affordability and accessibility and really sustainability, that these programs need to be sustainable and continue and move forward. And starting with the direct practical research that Josephine did, that advises and directs and is important to developing standards and guidances that our design engineers and then our policymakers can use to help create environments to make the easy decisions for people to be healthy, to provide healthy environments for them. So I appreciate our speakers. If you have any questions, we are out of time, so please put them in the chat, and we will ask our speakers to answer them or provide some feedback to them following the event. So thank you so much. I hope this session was useful. I'd like to now move us to a 5-minute wellness break before the start of our next session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cameron, for leading a very inspiring session. And we would like to thank the speakers. Amazing to hear all of you guys today. Thank you. We have 5 minutes. At 1:40, we will start again. Thank you, everybody. Well, good afternoon again and welcome back. It is 1:40 and we are ready to start track 3. That's entitled Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion as a Policy. And the person who's heading up this track, the moderator, is Dr. Nia Malou. She's a licensed architect and founder of Showcase Architects. She's also an educator teaching design building courses, science courses at Howard University. I'm going to allow her to request her to speak more about her own interests, her background, where she is, and what her panel is going to bring us today. So with that, floor is yours, Nia.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. Good afternoon, good morning. I'm not sure which time zone everybody is. Thank you for being here. I think there are a few people in the waiting room. I think one of my panelists is, so if they can be let in. And as I share and I start, I want to be very conscious of the time. So I'll start. I will give you like 5-minute introduction about who and what I do. And then each one of my panelists have 15 minutes to talk on very important topic, which is, I'm sure, dear to everybody. But we're only going to give you the key points here. And hopefully we'll have a lot of robust question answers if we have time. So this is track 3. And I'm Nia Malou. I think Kumkum had a wonderful introduction. So I'm an architect and an educator. So what I'm going to bring out is why I am moderating and what makes me a component to moderate. Other than being involved from HiBR from 2018, this particular topic is very dear to me. Of course, if you don't know, Howard University is a historically Black college. And it is one of the first college which was given as land endowment by Congress, established in 1867. And I'm going to introduce my panelist very soon, as soon as I finish a little introduction on myself. So to me, why this is so dear to me is because I bring a different perspective as an architect and educator. I believe we 3 components, the built environment, climate change, and society, have to come together. And with that premise, I have shaped curriculum in Howard University, and I'm shaping the curriculum throughout the world. So one of the things which I really is astonishing me as an educator is climate doesn't wait and it's changing, and we as human beings are not changing the way we teach, the way we learn, the way we do. We're so stagnant. So I thought one of the things which really is to me justice is climate change is global injustice to our kids, to the animals, to the plant. What we are doing today, the consequences are going to be felt by others. So with that premise, and there's another premise, another layer, which most of the speakers spoke. Black communities bear the most disproportionate burden. So if you we can go on about this. I've talked about what is anti-racist sustainability, but this is not my forum, it's my panelists. I'm going to keep moving on. There's a lot of words for environmental justice, but the one thing I'm going to use today is there's only one health, and you have to get it right. And you have to get it right for everybody, including the earth, animal, and us. So to get that, I wrote a course and I won a course development prize on environmental justice, health, and decarbonization. So my premise is you have to use environmental justice as an umbrella, and you have to use education. You have to prepare the future. There is no way, shape, or form you can do any change if you don't prepare your future. So I do believe what Nelson Mandela says, education is the powerful weapon to change this world. So with that, I started this course and I won a huge national course prize, and I'm able to do this in Howard University. Stanford University has joined me on this effort. I've had to establish a lab at Stanford University, and now we're giving free global university access. There are 600 downloads of our material we are creating on decarbonization. How do we take out carbonization? How can all university professors be equipped on this criteria, how to teach decarbonization? So that is the premise of me saying I can do equitable. That is me trying to be equitable in my educator work. So my 3 speakers, and I'm going to hold their slides. Sorry to swing back and forth. are wonderful, very, very highly educated. I'm not even sure if I can be, but they're wonderful, and they're going to explain to you different ways of looking at DEI as a policy. So I have Dr. Ele, Dr. Joyce, and Dr. Dana, and they're going to look at the same thing. I looked at it one lens as curriculum, and they're going to look at it as different lens. And I hope Dr. Ele is here. Is he here now?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I'm going to do the slides. So if you could, so you have 15 minutes, Dr. Ele, and you can start. You could introduce yourself, please.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Yele Aluko. You can move to the next slide. I am pleased to be here with this esteemed panel today. And I am going to be speaking about health equity. Health equity in the context of human health, as well as within the context of environmental justice and environmental health. I work at Ernst & Young as Chief Medical Officer and Director for the Center for Health Equity. I have no disclosures. So the agenda essentially is going to shine a lens on health equity and the health equity ecosystem, which is a very complex one. Talk about the environmental drivers of health disparities, and also pull in the context, and you have alluded to this, Nia, of the intersection of public health and the built environment. And then talk about what kind of solutions we are addressing in the markets. Next slide, please. So what is health equity? Fundamentally, it's important for us to understand that there's a plethora of definitions out there, but health equity is an aspirational goal. It does not exist. Indeed, it doesn't exist because there is no societal equity in the United States and indeed across the world. But the principle of health equity speaks to a commitment by society to eliminate health disparities and to impact the social determinants of health that drive those disparities. We must remember that health equity is achieved when one thing happens. It is achieved when health disparities are eliminated. And within that framework of elimination of health disparities, it provides every individual, irrespective of their specific social, racial, or other demographic portfolios, have the ability to achieve their full health potential. Next slide, please. What you see here is what we call the health equity ecosystem. In other words, to achieve health equity, these constructs have to be in play in society. The far left of this slide, you talk about equitable distribution of power, infrastructural resources, other types of resources, such as educational resources. People have to be equally empowered, and conditions in all communities needs to be reasonably equitable, and quality of healthcare also is delivered in an equitable manner, irrespective of demographics. If that big bubble on the left is in place, then the smaller bubble in the middle on the right enables healthy exposures in society, healthy choices, and healthy behaviors. And then if that does occur, there's a decrease in medical conditions. There's a decrease in health risk. And if that happens, when people enter the health industry, they achieve equitable care, you have health equity. Now, an imbalance in what I've just described creates an increased risk for health, for health risk that leads to health inequities. And the next slide depicts exactly what I just said, whereby you have structural drivers that are driven by housing, transportation, nutritional challenges that lead to unhealthy personal exposures and behaviors, and communities that are structured in a manner that they are inequitable for society to achieve resources that enable them to develop educational literacy, health literacy, and so on. And that results in a disproportionate vulnerability in medical conditions in certain vulnerable populations. It had been thought that Black and Brown people had more hypertension, more diabetes for genetic reasons. We've come to find out over the past number of decades that the social determinants of health increase risk vulnerability, such that when people now enter the health system, the yellow bubble, small bubble to the right, if you compare a Black person, brown person who comes to the health system at the age of 45 compared to a Caucasian at the age of 45, if they both have hypertension, the degree of hypertension in the Black and brown person is likely to be more advanced. And the same would apply to diabetes and so on. Entering the bricks and mortars of the health system, vulnerable populations are now at risk for differential diagnosis, differential treatment, delayed diagnosis, and poor coordination of healthcare. And that results in health inequity, manifesting as health disparities, differences in mortality, morbidity, life expectancy, and overall health status. Next slide, please. So let's pivot and talk about what is not often spoken in the context of health inequity, and that's the environmental drivers of health inequity. Let me also mention that this context of the conversation today is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you can't have a DEI conversation within the healthcare space without needing to know that organizations that embrace DEI principles and cultures are those that are more likely to be able to transform their cultures to be receptive health equity. So I want to talk about the role of the environment in health disparities. Environmental justice speaks to the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of everyone, regardless of demographics, race, color, immigrant status, income, in the development and implementation and enforcement of laws in the environment that are equitable. Now, this goal will be achieved when everyone enjoys the same degree of protection from hazards in the environment. And when people have equal access to decision makers that enable policies to be put in place that provide equitable environments for all society. Air pollution is one of the most serious threats to human health. I think that is becoming much more clear now, and 90% or more people across the world are exposed to unhealthy air. It causes large amount of premature deaths, up to 7 million across the world. 2.6 billion suffer household exposure. So this is not just outside exposure, also within the household. And 8 billion suffer ambient exposure. You may notice that the population of the world is 8 billion. In essence, everybody suffers ambient exposure for toxins. These pollutants in the air create climate change, and they have particulates in them called black carbon that are detrimental to health. In America, air pollution disproportionately impacts Black and brown communities, accounts for more than 820 billion of extra medical bills related to air pollution. Now, residential segregation is something to be very informed about. Residential segregation exists today in the United States. It is a relic of systemic racism, which has been driven by historical government public policy decisions that impacted opportunities for equitable access to fair and safe housing. Lower property values tend to attract more industrial and commercial activity. Because of industrial and commercial presence, there is less community resources in general, like schools and clinics and hospitals. And those properties, those communities tend to have less political and economic power and a risk of being disenfranchised. You cannot separate environmental racism from residential segregation. There are myriads of ways that communities of color are excessively exposed to toxic environmental factors. Now, the impact on public health is that these communities tend to be victims of food deserts reduced access to public education and health systems, transportation, and so on. And the end downstream impact is lower health and financial literacy. Next slide, please. What you see here is a map of Richmond, and it speaks to the context of redlining. Now, redlining was a discriminatory practice used against Black and brown people, depending on where they lived, seeking home loans and capital for home ownership. Neighborhoods were actually graded, as you can see, different colors, classified from A being premium to D being hazardous for loans. Now, this is called redlining, and redlining was banned 50 years ago. However, the contemporary forms of redlining actually still exist today, and a lot of this has been in the media in the past 5 to 10 years. Next slide, please. What is also of note is that the level of toxicity in the air is also correlated with the color of the coding. So green being desirable neighborhoods to live in, were generally Caucasian, low levels of air pollution. That's the top left. On the bottom right, grading of D, hazardous levels of air pollution, essentially Black and brown communities. Next slide, please. So finally, I just want to talk about this intersection of public health and built environment. We're talking about commercial buildings, residential homes, parks, and recreational areas. Next slide, please. There are what we call foundations for healthy buildings. It is important, and this is now scientifically shown, that these 9 elements of air quality, thermal health, moisture, dust and pests, water quality, noise, lighting and views, and ventilation within buildings provide more controlled environments that enable best positions for human health inside the built environment. We consider that people live in homes and people go to work in buildings. A lot of time is spent inside bricks and mortar, and having this constellation of competencies is very critical. So to summarize, pollution in the air is a threat to human health and also to animal health. And it is a multi-organ threat. You can see the list of organs that can be impacted with different manifestations of disease, from the brain to the heart to the lungs, in gastrointestinal organs, and so on and so forth. Next slide. How do we address this at EY? Next slide. We have an EY Center for Health Equity, and we are committed to solutions. We assist clients build competencies that help them understand where they can fit into the solution matrix depending on their business model. We provide enterprise health equity strategies, organizational culture, and transformation. We use data. We encourage our clients to use data, health equity data analytics, to measure performance in a transparent, near real-time fashion. And there's a big void in understanding as to the drivers of health equity. So it is important that education is provided about the foundational concepts of health equity, including the thank you very much. Back to you, Nia.
Oh, Nia, I think you're still muted. This is Chris.
I said, thank you, Dr. Ele, for your wonderful presentation. And we're going to move on to our next panelist. And thank you for keeping the time of 15 minutes. I appreciate that. I think you're here, right, Dr. Joyce?
Great. Well, thank you so much, Nia.
Okay, you could introduce yourself. You got your 15 minutes. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So happy to be joining all of you today. I am Joyce Lee of Indigo JLD Green Health, and also a commissioner at the Philadelphia Environmental Justice Commission. And I want to thank Dr. Aluko for this comprehensive presentation on health equity. We know that we're all trying to get there. And today I am going to share two specific areas of the journey of my firm's research and practice on environmental justice and gender equity, how to get there, and with a policy experience from the New York City office of OMB, where I serve as chief architect. We try to integrate a lot of these angles into the work that we do. Next, please. Next. So first on environmental justice. The Philadelphia Environmental Justice Advisory Commission is a relatively new format entity that is forming around the country now. We see that local governments are beginning to take this very seriously, and there are few information. I look forward to meeting all of these counterparts. And if you are a county or city that has a formal structure on environmental justice, we would love to hear from you. So in Philadelphia, we get to this point. It started in 2017 when legislation was introduced in City Council to establish standards. And then in 2019, the city's Office of Sustainability convened a working group to understand what is a plan for the city and what could be done. Then City Council adopts the legislation to provide a commission in 2019. Then it's held to understand the landscape in the city. So none of this is easy work. And then of course we know what happened early 2020, the pandemic hit. But these three photos that I'm showing at the bottom also underscore the urgency of this work. 2020, the city was dealing with the aftermath of an oil refinery explosion fire near an overburdened residential neighborhood. And then in 2021, Hurricane Ida wreaked havoc in a non-coastal city of Philadelphia. Many woke up to the fact that a non-coastal city could be underwater with all of these arterials, inundated with the flood. The citizen woke up to this fact that it can be everybody's problem, but those without insurance are hurt the most in the middle of a pandemic. And then Mayor Kenny formally appointed the commission, or 17 members in City Hall while everybody was still masking. Now we are building the governance from the ground up and writing bylaws of what this commission will be. The fact that it is a commission, it means that the work would go on in perpetuity, and one day we would like to be as mature as a planning commission in the city. Next, please. What is the purpose of the commission? It would review the existing local government programs and look into the future, advise future policies and projects, and then setting a vision and action plan for a just city going forward. Our members are community organizers, attorneys, academics, graduate students, and there's one pediatrician and one architect, myself. It is great to converge on the importance of public health. And again, this is not a group of public health practitioners. It speaks to the relevance of this conference. And we value the lived experience of community members that have lived experience. And then, of course, the cumulative impacts of certain toxins and environmental injustice in the community. Next, please. We will be embarking on a community dialogue for different parts of the city in the neighborhoods. And we will also be discussing a grant program to aid communities in need. Most recently, we put our support, yes, next please. We put our support for the city of Philadelphia to receive a planning grant for a community bisected by a highway decades ago. In the foreground, you can see that the Chinatown community, the residential and education buildings built against a 10-lane highway. So we hope that this Reconnecting Communities grant from the USDOT will help, number one, improve placemaking by potentially capping the highway, as you can see here, reducing particulate and other pollutions that could very well be asthma triggers. And third, enhance the traffic safety as children and elderly frequently navigate across this very busy neighborhood and across the highway. So what we have now is a short overview as we are still starting the commission, looking forward to coming back in, let's say, a year to talk about some of the ongoing work underway. So next, please. I am going to pivot to another justice issue, gender equity. And this is research undertaken between my firm, University of Pennsylvania, SCUP, Society of College and University Planning, and the American Institute of Architects. Next, please. In 2016, the AIA, the American Institute of Architects, was ready for a comprehensive update of the design guidance of lactation rooms. There are previously very little standardized information for designers. For example, how big the room needs to be, what kind of amenities and design specifications. I have to give credit to CDC colleague, Ms. York, FAIA, who collaborated to find focus groups and experts to test out our strategies and assumptions around the country. This focus group that we assembled talk about everything from lighting to full-length mirror, from coat hooks to sound isolation of the walls to fabric of the chairs. During pumping, for example, should mothers be multitasking or would they prefer to be in a calm setting with biophilic design so that they can be more relaxed? Next, please. Out of the guidelines that we developed, we also found a peer-reviewed research opportunity where I taught at the University of Pennsylvania. With my experience serving as chief architect of New York City OMB, I long cherished bringing interdisciplinary cooperation. So collaboration across the School of UPenn, like nursing, design, and public health. We are to Kathy Benton from SCUP, School Society of College and University Planning, who provided the necessary data for analysis. SCUP reached out on our behalf to their membership across the United States. Because of the diverse membership of SCUP, we know that it would be a significant study to look at the state of the art 8 years after the Affordable Care Act has been implemented, which promoted breastfeeding. Next, please. We also collaborated with a law firm that had real estate experience. They did an analysis in 2019 before the pandemic. We may not have time to go into details other than to say that the green and the purple are those states in the country that have more progressive legislation for mothers, nursing mothers. But all in all, you can see that the landscape for protecting mothers, nursing mothers in particular, are really all over the landscape. And they are very varied legislation in place and therefore very little consistency. Next. So what I'm showing here is on the SCUP website. You can find out more information on scup.org wellness study. One of the analysis is to look at the size of campuses from the respondents. We have over 100 campuses that responded to our survey, and the differences between large campuses, medium campuses, and small campuses are actually quite even, around 30%. So we were very pleased that the data is quite reflective of what we're seeing on university campuses and provision for nursing mothers. Next, please. These are the SCUP regions based on the concentration and density of their university members. Again, we have 114 universities that responded, and the percentage here is showing the response rate of different regions around the country. Not surprisingly, Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, and the West have some of the highest response rate. But we also saw that the Midwest is, equally quite effective. Next, please. Before I dive into the survey analysis of the research, I would like to share some practical example, knowing that this is a research to practice panel. The pod may be something you are now familiar with. We see a lot in transportation terminals. While these temporary accommodations are needed amenities, say during construction, it is better than nothing, but we always encourage a permanent space dedicated to nursing mothers. Next, please. Then what about permanent solutions? This is another office example that integrates some of the best practices we cited at the AIA guide. Let's say a good size sink that you can see with a mirror that reflected the artwork in the room, under-counter refrigerator, and a comfortable chair. And in many offices, they use a conference reservation system that you see on the right quite often. And how about including a mother's room in one of these systems? Next, please. The AIA guide also gives a set of parameters. How large the space does it need to be? We had proven that a 7-foot by 7-foot room could be the minimum for a handicap accessible space for a lactation room. And with the feedback, we also provided a multi-pod scenario where there could be both privacy and also allowing for a communal setting. Sometimes mothers could feel very isolated during this nursing period. And with the multiple feedback that we receive, we are seeing that it's not just university campus or offices that could be providing these kinds of spaces. What about buildings that are for public assembly, such as libraries, museums, sport arenas, and airports? We have a separate peer review study that is focused on airport. For those who are interested, you can contact me afterwards. Next, please. Back to the university campus study. We have findings from SCUP campuses that from over 100 universities that there are varying degree of amenities that are provided. The good news is that 94%, as you can see on the left, rooms are dedicated lactation spaces. That means they are not shared with a bathroom. 92% of them have electrical outlets, very useful for pumps and other equipment. And then we go all the way down to more the left, 43% have sound isolation, and then 20% have art and music to provide a relaxing environment. Next. Because you may be incorporating lactation room in new construction, renovation, or just mere remodeling, we have put these amenity features into different categories, such as capital change, design amenities, from items such as just hardwares, appliances, or portable purchases. So it shows a degree of difficulty and relative ease in implementation so that you can sequence that as you're planning out your work. For example, getting a hospital grade pump, building a feedback loop, and those things can start right away. Getting towel dispensers, mirrors, and refrigerators are not that hard either. Many of you already have locksmiths on campus, so installing privacy locks could be a first step. And if you have a card key access for rooms, you can monitor the frequency of use in the room, all the better.
Excuse me, Jackie.
Please. Yes.
You have a minute.
Okay, so I am going to skip over the next two. We have detailed information on both the funding and the planning of who gets involved. And then I'm going to jump into the key takeaways. I would suggest that after our study, we are able to share planning for a multidisciplinary campus-wide lactation committee is a great idea and involve all the stakeholders there. Develop and publicly communicate the messaging make sure that lactation's room are integrated in a campus design strategy to get high level of support. Next, please. And then establish minimum campus standards and offer real-time feedback, using this feedback for regular campus-wide reassessment. Next, please. So we hope that these takeaways will create a more just environment on campus for nursing mothers who have incredible demands and very little resources to request accommodation. And the web link at the bottom gives you additional information on the results. And my contact information is there, and hope that these two journeys show how we can look to achieve health equity in the long run.
Thank you, Dr. Joyce. And we're going to move on to the last panelist, and Dr. Dana. If you have questions, please put them in chat. It's all yours, Dana. Introduce yourself, and you have 15 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. And most of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate in this panel. I'm actually very glad for the opportunity to be connected to the theme of justice. A few words about me. My professional path was a little bit waved, in the sense that I started as being a medical doctor and then an architect, and I put together both experiences under the umbrella of sustainability, of the impact of the environment, of human health and well-being. Currently, I'm a research associate professor at the EPF School of Engineering, France. And most of my research is related to that interface between people and environment. And I'm glad today to have the opportunity to take the opportunity to relate some design elements to the support of justice and well-being of people for a safer and more diverse environment. So the first slide, please. I will address in this agenda the social justice, communities, and individual as a start point for the journey through people, microbes, and visual attributes of the environment. And then I have a few slides that will describe how they can actually be connected, how maybe small things in the design can make a big difference. So social justice, there is no actually a very clear definition or a unique definition for social justice. Well, I selected two of them. The one given by United Nations, that social justice may be broadly understood as the fair and compassionate distribution of the fruits of economic growth. While the second, given by National Association of Social Workers in the US, social justice is the view that everyone deserves equal economic, political, and social rights and opportunities. Social workers aim to open the doors of access and opportunity for everyone, particularly those with greatest needs. However, not important which definition we have or we consider, it's important to know that it refers to equal rights, equal opportunities, equal treatment. And this cannot come without education, employment, entrepreneurship opportunities, and housing. And this is where design actually may give a pretty consistent contribution, even though maybe it can go under the limit of perception sometimes. What is a thriving community? I would like to discuss a little bit about that. A thriving community, it's defined as a community where people of all generations can live healthy and fulfilled lives and can grow, flourish, and prosper now and in the future. This is the most accurate definition of thriving communities that I found. Why it's important how we define a community? It is important because everything comes from the people's needs. So what do they need? We need strong social relationships. We know economy and opportunity. We know community. We need community engagement. We need ecology and place. We need mind and body wellness. And all of these are directly, almost directly, or maybe sometimes indirectly related to the design. Next slide, please. So also, I cannot go through what is called justice, community, and design without noticing that different kinds of design approaches have in mind or relate to the justice, the community, and the design. This is the sustainable design or sustainability, it's biophilic design, it's universal design, it's human-centered design, and environmental design. All of these are thinking about human needs. And I want to take the opportunity to recall the 5 conditions for effective practice in biophilic design of Kellert. And these are: emphasize human adaptation to the natural world, promotes repeated and sustained engagement with nature, reinforce the interconnected whole, integrated design interventions that connect with the overall setting or space, fosters emotional attachments to settings and places, fosters positive and sustained interactions and relationships among people and the natural environment. Actually, all of these are very, very human traits. And this is why I keep thinking about design through the needs of people. Next slide, please. And basically, I did a correlation between what is the pyramid of Maslow. I guess that most of everyone already knows the pyramid of Maslow of the people needs and how this is related to human behavior. So the needs are from the base of the pyramid to the top of the pyramid, more and more sophisticated, more and more related, or we can regard it as a transition from the status of more like an animal to the what it is human as a creator. So no step from a lower level to a higher level can be done unless the needs for the first level are met. So for this, the survival, it's related, if it's not met, of course, it is related to the food, water, and the shelter crave. This is correlated with disengaged people, with people who are not interested in what is around them. Therefore, it's more like saving their own lives than regarding or being interested by the community. While these are met, people need security. And here, they are not disengaged, but either not engaged at all, because they are looking very much to protect themselves. Belonging, it's the next step. We need all to feel that we are part of the group, part of the society. And this is a moment when we as human beings become engaged. And here is also the fine line where our spirit, our creative spirit as humans, our connection, our openness to the community become activated, and we start to become engaged, and our engagement will increase with the importance that is given to our work, to our contribution. And at the end of the pyramid, in the very top, it's a self-actualization where we can give the most of our creativity, the most of our contribution to the society. Therefore, whatever we build, the more we support the base of the pyramid, the more we have people who are engaged, who are creative, who are giving to the society, who create balance in the society, and have the possibility of having a harmonious life in a harmonious society. Having this in mind, I was wondering how the visual attributes of the environment, next slide please, can be contributors to the environment, not only to the environment as design elements, but to the environment as triggers of different kinds of human reactions. We all have this instinct of nesting. We all tend to decorate and to surround us by a pleasant environment in our homes, in our workspaces, which can be sometime or it is sometimes very personal, but still it's our thing that we seek, and mostly we use the visual attributes for doing this. Therefore, I did a comprehensive systematic review of research on visual attributes of the built environment. And then I extrapolated this work and how this can be applicable in architectural practice and how this actually can support healthier buildings and cities. The systematic review started with 382 studies, and by selection for all the criteria, 88 studies were selected, addressing artificial light, daylight, color, and indoor nature exposure. What it has to be here a little bit underlined, it's the proportions of the studies by different groups. As the study showed that there is much more research needed for creating really a framework for architects, which would be one of my intentions. And 50% of the studies were both qualitative and quantitative, 30% were only qualitative, while quantitative only 20%, but these are the most measurable ones. Then most of the studies addressed artificial lighting, less color, and even less indoor nature exposure, and the lowest number of studies address daylight impact. Most of them are done in laboratory, followed by office environment, healthcare environment, and other. The studies in laboratory, though, are studies that somehow take the subjects, the participants to the study from their natural activity. The studies investigated the general psychology, the environmental general psychology, and different kind of psychological impacts. They addressed perception, attention and restoration, cognition, and affect. There are all the percentages, but I don't think it makes sense to enter all these details, but rather to explore what these studies showed us. Next slide, please. We may wonder why visual attributes, because first of all, more than half of our brain is devoted to processing visual information. And also because, as William Churchill said, we shape the built environment and after it shapes us. So what we build will build us. Next slide, please. About the impacts of artificial lighting. So there are some psychological impacts, some physiological impacts, and also environmental and environmental psychology impacts. And at the end of the slides by attribute, I will put them together. The correlated color temperature is one of the parameters that was measured. And for instance, the cool light is preferred for work, while for leisure, we prefer the warm light. Also, though, the warm light can increase the stress parameters in depressive and anxious subjects, but not necessarily in the normal ones. Also, more studies were considered in addressing multiple parameters of the light, the architectural lighting and the setting lighting. And illuminance is the single most studied parameter in a few selected studies. An increase in illuminance level generates an increase in the visual comfort and an increase in also an increase in well-being, mood, and self-control capacity of subjects experiencing fatigue. It is also a stimulant for increasing sympathetic stimulation, performance, and especially the performance for difficult tasks. Also is to be noted that variances of illuminance are in the usually used range. Blue light, for instance, is proved to increase brain responses as visualized, that can be visualized on MRI examination and correlated with increased memory task performance, while green light deactivates the brain in response areas involved with working memory in the brain. So colors of the light are pretty important. Blue light also increases the brain signals and arousal on measured electrical signals and increases performance, especially during the nighttime. From the perspective of physiological impacts, the visual acuity, it's well related with well-illuminated environments and with task illumination, with the circadian rhythm, can be dramatically impacted by the artificial lighting, especially by the artificial lighting with blue spectrum in the hours of evening, and by this inducing sleep problems. Also, it's related with states of anxiety and also with the autonomous nervous system functionality. More than that, lighting can induce or not the feeling of safety, can favor or not observation, can influence environmental perception, and according to the illumination of the light, especially architectural lighting or warm lighting, can make the same space look much more valuable than cool light. So the perception of the value of the space can be influenced dramatically by the lighting. The same for atmosphere perception and the workplace satisfaction, which is related with a good and functional lighting, as well as with the architectural lighting. Next slide, please. Regarding the colors, the studies are mostly addressing red color. And yes?
Dr. Dana, you have, could you wrap up in 2 or 3 minutes, please?
Okay, did I speak 10 minutes? Okay. Because usually I speak very fast and I tried not to. Okay.
I mean, I don't know, if there's no questions, you can go on till the end, but I don't know.
Okay. Okay. So the colors have different kind of, I will make it faster, will impact the behavior, the arousal, the cognitive performance. So from the behavior, it's avoidance or attraction, purchase behavior, or perceived exertion, for instance. We have a higher perception of the exertion in a red than in a green environment. Also, the IQ test responses are, the score is lower for red color than for blue color, for instance. Also, physiological impacts of the colors refers to arousal, to muscular strength and muscular velocity, and also environmental impacts that are related to perception of environments, the pleasantness of environment, spatial dimension, and spatial orientation. Especially those are related to the association of colors and the feature of cool or warm color. Next slide, please. For the daylight, which actually is not so much addressed in the studies as the topic of study, it's very much related with cognitive performance in different kind of environments, with mood and alertness, and with stress. It's also related to physiological impacts, which are related to healing, length of stay, mortality, which are, for instance, in an ICU unit, the mortality can be half to the patient with windows towards south than windows towards north. The growth of children is related to the availability of daylighting in classrooms, also visual comfort. The sick leave, it's highly related with availability of daylighting and also the state of well-being. As environmental psychology impacts, it impacts the circadian rhythm, the privacy and control, and activity satisfaction. Next slide, please. For indoor nature exposure, the psychological impacts address cognition, so attention and attention restoration are definitely improved in the presence of plants or nice views, the same for stress recovery. Also, physiological impacts, which are related to autonomous nervous system and stress parameters like EKG, blood pressure, electroencephalogram are correlated with stress relief, or on the opposite, in the absence of indoor nature exposure, as well as the spatial perception is modified, the customer satisfaction, and also spatial appreciation. For the next on this slide, it's much more the correlation between all these elements. So we can build up with lighting, color, indoor nature exposure, and daylight. We can manipulate the preference, comfort, and stress relief given by the spaces, as well as the mood and the cognition performance of the occupants, and as well also wellness and healing. And as we regard everything as a total, it's one of my studies that it's undergoing right now regarding the microbiome. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. No. No, a little bit. No, this is after, it's before. Okay, before this one. Thank you. It was good. So the next slide after this one, please. Thank you. So daylight, lighting, and plants and soil are very much related with the environmental microbiome and human microbiome. And those are directly related to health and well-being. So it's not only the visible part of these elements that contribute to our health and well-being, but also by influencing the microbiome. This is an ongoing study, so I will not say right now more about this, but I am coming back to the Maslow pyramid and having in mind this study. The next slide, please. Please, next slide. Yes. So having in mind the Maslow pyramid, we can see that the survival parts are reinforced by design that address daylight, lighting, and chromatic and indoor nature exposure by providing an affordable living, providing a size and price, and we also would be good if we can provide size, price, and ownership options. At the level of security, the design can support the perception of safetiness or safety, to reduce the anxiety, the wayfinding, to promote recovery and healing, to increase work satisfaction and perceived environment, the pleasantness of perceived environment. So by these elements in design considered by these visual attributes, we can reinforce the security feeling. We can reinforce the security of belonging by respecting different kinds of cultural aspects and by improving communication and cultural connections, as well as spaces that support learning, reduce stress, and positive perceptions can be applied in schools. And by this can support the importance of the community and the individual in the community. And of course, they can contribute to increase creativity and pleasantness and positive mood that would be like a trigger for human creations. The next slide, please. This is a diagram that explains how design can create connections, how these visual attributes can be connected to built environment, and they can be contributors for human health and well-being, for affordable living, for economic sustainability, for education and learning, only by manipulating different kinds of visual elements. So they will support health, well-being, and affordable living. And at the level of the city, please, next slide. The same aspects can be applied in the city by creating cities that are pleasant to live in, that support different kind of activities and community, that offer affordable living and education and entrepreneurship opportunities. And by this, supporting community health and well-being, economic sustainability, resilient communities, education, and learning. So finally, just to conclude, every part of the design that we consider can be a contributor or not for a healthy and supportive environment, being it at the level of building or at the level of city. And the relation between different factors that contribute to the people well-being and equal opportunities, for instance, it's much more related to design that we might expect. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, everybody. What a wonderful panel I had. They brought everything together and we are up on time. So any questions which come up? I guess we all shared our emails. But if there are specific questions, I can send it to the panelist or I can direct them. Thank you so much. And thank you for Kumkum and the rest of the team for supporting us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nia. Appreciate you and your team. What a wonderful set of presentations here today. So there's a question here that someone has asked about the recordings for today. Actually, the full conference will be recorded. Chris, if you are here and you could speak to that. I know it is being recorded. I think we're going to be putting it on our website, but either, Chris, is there anything you can be able to speak to the recording, please?
Yeah, thanks, Kumkum. We've been running a recording in the background. It should download to my computer here as a single file. So what we may do is, Kumkum, we may just maybe break it up into concurrent sessions. That's something we can do so people can sort of tune into the individual 70-minute sessions versus having one long one, but it shouldn't be too difficult. So I would say, at some point later today, the download should be complete, and then it's just a matter of us working in the background to get those elements posted. So I'll work with you and Meenakshi on that.
Okay, great. I'm just checking the chat box to see if there are any other things that we need to address right now in the near term. Pardon me. I did want to take a moment here and let you know that we are preparing an after event survey, and you will be receiving that. Meenakshi will be administering that. Meenakshi, is that something we may send out today or tomorrow? Just is there something you can speak to that?
Yeah, I think tomorrow evening or something like that.
All right. And we really do value your feedback. Our quest is to improve what we are doing, how we're doing it. So we will be looking to send that out. We're going to try to keep it as short and focused as possible, but we'll welcome your input. At this point, I would like to introduce someone who's going to be making our closing remarks. And that is Judith Heerwagen. Judy is with GSA. And if you'll just give me one moment here. She's listed as the program expert as the U.S. General Services Office of Federal High Performance Green Buildings. And I'm going to ask that Judy speaks a little bit more about herself as well. I mean, I do have it listed here that she is our core founding member of HiBR from the past, from way back. She's a Ph.D. and a psychologist whose work focuses on behavioral, psychosocial, and health impacts of building design and operations. I'm going to stop there so that Judy can speak more to everything that she does and is. And without further ado, Judy, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, I've had a very varied professional life, I guess I can say. I started out at the University of Washington as a professor in architecture, and I still have an appointment there. And I've had my own firm, and then I've joined GSA. But I think that whole experience has made me see things a little bit differently, which came in very valuable in this presentation series. This was an amazing group of people who have really opened my eyes, I think, to the enormous impact we can have by thinking about buildings differently as really places for people where they spend most of their time. And we spend a lot of time, as we should, on the environment, the air quality and all of those things. I think we really need to start thinking also about integrating the design of the workplace into that. And one of the biggest impacts over and over and over again, everything I've studied has told me that people really value windows and daylight. And why is that? And the connection to nature, which was made here. But I think one of the things that we did not talk about, because it kind of wasn't part of the agenda, but looms big, is what are we going to do with our buildings? People have decided that they can work from home very well, and their home environments probably have a lot of the attributes our buildings don't have. People can go outside and work. They can work in many different places. They can move around. They can go for walks in the middle of the afternoon. So this sense of control over things that we feel when we're working at, we miss people. That is clear. It's becoming more and more clear that the office is largely for social engagement, working together, being with other people. And I think that that was kind of clear in a number of the presentations. But I think that these were great. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. And I really do think maybe next year we focus on the future of work and what that means for all of us. We can use the data from these presentations to think about and inform that process. But I think our workplaces are going through a significant evolution right now. And we really need to think about what that means and how we do it. And this was great. I'm really looking forward to tomorrow. And thank you, Kumkum, for guiding us through all this and being the new leader of this. And I'm really impressed with everyone who talked.
Thank you very much, Judy. Thank you.
And thank you for all of you.
Judy, I would like to go ahead and ask a little bit about anything that you know of in the federal building space that you could possibly speak to, because you're in the high performance buildings, you're with GSA with a huge amount of stock of federal buildings. Is there anything that's happening in the federal sector that you are able to share at this time?
Well, I think what our office is doing is really trying to assess what this situation is and how we can respond to it. So I think there are lots of different ideas that are beginning to perk up about what that environment should be. Should it be primarily social? Do we need to pay more attention to social engagements and people working together? Because we clearly know that almost every meeting is going to be a hybrid meeting in the future. We work with teams across the country. I'm in Washington, state of Washington. We have people in the mid-coast across all time zones. And that's not unusual because we can connect easily through our media like this. But that isolates people to some extent. And I think we're getting to the point where, I hate to say it, but we're getting Zoom fatigue. And I think all of you understand that. And we're looking, there are going to be new technologies out that are, some of them that are looking at virtual reality and looking at how you can connect groups in the metaverse. And that's going to change dramatically within the next couple of years. But I think we don't have the answers yet, and I'm not sure any, but we're going to experiment. We're going to looking at different kinds of setups in the interior. Are we going to make them mostly for social factors, and how do we make rooms that actually are going to have enough screens in it that you can bring in people from other parts of the country? And so we're trying to pull together these things that are all issues now, all problems that all of us face. And we've got external partners that we work with. But I wish I had more concrete stuff, but we're in an experimental phase. What do we want to try? What do we want to test? I know leadership is anxious to get people back to work, but there's a real pushback. People feel comfortable working at home, and they don't have hour-long commutes. And I think that's a huge, huge factor here. It's just too many people have too long commutes getting to work. That's a very pragmatic issue, but it weighs pretty big in some cities. So I know I'm not given the answers that Kumkum might have liked to have said, but we're along with everybody else. We're testing. Everything we do is going to be out in the open, though. We're going to talk about our failures as well as successes. This isn't a just so story. We really want to be able to say, we tried this, it failed. We think this is why it failed and what we could have done better. So we've got a big group that's working on that, and probably start doing things as soon as it's more acceptable to get into the office. I'm sure everybody on this phone call has experiences like this. I'd like to hear from you.
I think that's given that we actually have a few moments here. I see a couple of smiles there. And if anybody is open to being visible again, we would let you know we still have 10 minutes. So before we close for today and then get ready to begin tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock promptly, there's been a lot of food for thought here today. And I would like to open up the floor. If there is anyone who would have a short sentence or two here to be able to share with anybody, with all of us, would love to hear you. The floor is open.
Judy, this is Linda, I'm glad you brought that up because one of the big projects at ASID is the concept of return to work and what the interior designers are faced with in this huge shift that we're going through. Our clients are asking for help. Not only for design solutions, but for well-being solutions. What's that mental effect of our home office and our home domain versus what Charles Blumberg used to call the in-town domain, that office place. But we're also looking at it from all aspects of where people work, from manufacturing to corporate offices. So I think most of our concentration and thinking has been around more formal corporate offices, but there are all places of work that are being hugely impacted by the after effects of the shock of the pandemic and what we do.
And I really think the answer to some of this is experimentation.
Yep.
Don't roll something out big time until you've experimented with it and and looked at sort of, okay, and that doesn't need to be big fancy new furniture. And I think it's looking at trying to figure out what works, and I think that getting your workers involved with this is absolutely critical. This is not just a design decision. This is a work experience decision.
Yep.
And you've got to get those folks, and you've got to understand what the value of working at home has been for. And a lot of people are, particularly young people who aren't married, they like to socialize, and they've lost that part of their life. And I think that's really important to understand that we're not clones. Everybody who comes to work is going to have a slightly different perspective on what they need. We have to understand those needs, and we have to design for them.
Yeah.
And test the design rather than rolling out big time expensive responses to this. Really just looking at how do you test these things. And that's what we're going to focus on. It's not just rolling out a new thing across the country, but really saying, okay, what are the regional differences too? So there's a lot to learn here, and we have to learn fast.
Yeah, so Judy, thank you for your leadership in the high performance buildings. Really appreciate that.
Thanks, and I'm sure all of you are going to be going through this.
Thank you. Susan, you look like you are unmuted.
I am unmuted.
Please.
I'm just going to tell you, one of the things I noticed or thought about is that it's really probably very critically important for young people and new hires in these buildings to be able to meet and socialize, to meet their supervisors, to interact with others. From my standpoint, I'm on the other end of the age scale and work scale. I've been working all my life. I'm so happy just to be at home, and I'm an artist, and I've got my watercolors spread out right on the side of my table. So when I finish work, I just can swivel around and start painting. And that's something that I can't do in the office, instead of being in the traffic and then being frustrated in the traffic. So part of this might be an age and experience division.
I think that's true. And I think that young people coming in, really, they need that experience in the office to understand how the office works, who the people are, what their talents are, what their issues and concerns are. And you can't do that on Zoom. You just cannot. You've got to.
We have a few young folks here and still have a couple of more minutes, I would love to hear the perspective of a couple of young folks, guys.
I had my hand raised. I just wanted to say a couple of things about the pandemic. I fit into this group. I'm at University of Oregon. I have a research appointment there. And I'm part of the built biology and the built environment group with Kevin Van Den Wellenberg. And a lot of our work kind of led the front on how virus behaves in built environments. And a lot of my work centers around coronavirus and infectious disease indoors and the impact to human health. And I spend a lot of my time as a researcher with a science background looking at hospital-associated infection and how do viruses behave indoors. Or right now I'm working on a project that looks at gene expression in dust and weird things like that to try and make our buildings healthier places for us to work and live and recreate and study and learn and all of the things that we do indoors and spend all of our time indoors. And I wanted to give a shameless plug for a group that I'm part of that has become more important to me than I realized that it would. And it's called the Microbes and Social Equity Working Group. And, you know, I approach this from a science with a science lens because that's all of my education and schooling is. I am a scientist. And the Microbes and Social Equity Working Group, it's microbial exposures across ecosystems, urban and rural settings, looking at microbes as socio-political entities. And, you know, for me, the context is built environment. You know, and I like to look at the lens of like zoning and you know, some people can't help where they live or how they live or, you know, or what their building is made out of. But all of these things affect their health. And the purpose of this working group is to connect microbiology with social equity research, education policy, and practice to understand the interplay of microorganisms, individuals, societies, and ecosystems. And what I would like to see is a larger presence of like architecture, which we just don't have a presence of currently, but I would like to see. I'm trying to kind of bring that piece with me. Collectively, we seek to generate and communicate knowledge that will spark evidence based in public policy practice that supports equity and sustainability. And we do things, I mean, we publish in peer-reviewed articles, we hold symposiums and things like that. And it's kind of just looking at, you know, this micro piece in the context of diversity, equity, inclusion. For me, it's built environment because I bring that piece with me. I look at those intersections of engineering, architecture, and microbiology. You know, what your building is made from, how you operate it, and how that affects human health. And so, you know, the pandemic has been right up my alley. I mean, I've been making hay while the sun shines.
Leslie, thank you so much for both for sharing this. And there is a request for some link to that working group that you announced. Please, if you could put that in the chat box.
Yeah, I'll drop it in there right now.
Would appreciate that.
Sure.
We're coming close to the top of the hour.
Tomorrow.
So, I'm sorry?
I said, Leslie, make sure you're here tomorrow.
I will be.
We have a biochemical engineer speaking.
And what we would like to say is that tomorrow's session we'll be using the same Zoom link. So we look forward to everybody here and then some joining tomorrow. It promises to be another exciting day. Thank you everybody for joining today. And we are at 3 o'clock. We look forward to seeing you then. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye,
everyone.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.